Larson, yes, it's Larson and Larson. One with an E-N, one with an O-N. No relation. We already kind of went through that. But it is Larson and Larson live at Tim Dolly Ford in Spanish Fork. That's right, 2534 North, late June. Your final Friday in the month of June. Maybe a football Friday. We'll get to some college football chat. 64 days away from Utah and UCLA and getting things going on the college football front. But NBA draft, NHL draft, RSL in action this weekend. Plenty to get to, including some PGA Tour action. Brice Larson, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. We've got the U.S. men's national team in action this weekend, too. Sunday against Costa Rica. I'm excited for a little bit of soccer.
Yes, don't mean to leave our guys out. U.S. men's national team on the pitch this weekend. Of course, RSL All-Star Diego Luna of note in that regard. Coming up on the show today, Andy Larson of the Salt Lake Tribune. No one better to talk some hoops, to talk some jazz, and to, I'll say, sift through the noise on the NBA draft chatter. Ace Bailey, the Jazz top 5 pick, and more. Chris Kamrani of The Athletic joins us a little bit later on. We'll give you a PGA Tour leaderboard update with our friend Paul Pugmire. And then Matt Brown joins the program of Extra Points, of course, talking college football, realignment, and more. A lot to get to in that lane, Brice, and a lot too locally. Pac-12, Division I stuff. I mean, there's so much going on off the floor, off the field in college sports that we'll get to a lot of it there. Of course, there are some local teams that are affected by that, and we'll go from there. Brice Larson, Porter Larson, taking you through the afternoon. We'll hang up at 6 o'clock right here at Tim Dolly Ford in Spanish Fork. Again, as I mentioned before, whether it's tariffs, supply chain issues, inflation, car prices are going up. That's kind of a perpetual thing. Car prices are just always going up, as are real estate prices and the like. But Tim Dolly planned ahead. They're stocking up on thousands of pre-tariff priced vehicles, as well as the summer deals here at Tim Dolly Ford, including one I was told on the new Bronco. So come by and check that one out. Employee pricing, the Forever Warranty. The Forever Warranty is something you don't really get anywhere else besides this Tim Dolly Ford. Of course, you got to come in and buy the car from these guys, and they'll hook you up with a lifetime warranty on select services. TimDollyFord.com to view the roster, the lineup, and maybe call and chat with these guys before you come in and sit down and talk to these folks. I'm gonna give one of these salesmen their best shot, turning this Chevy guy into a Ford guy. Sell me on an F-150. We'll see if it can happen.
I'll tell you what, the one that's sitting right in front of us, this beautiful truck, not an F-150, but
it's a Maverick Lobo edition.
I like it. It's a nice blue color, or lighter blue, sky blue. I like it a lot.
I believe they have like a hybrid version of this. It's super capable, super utility driven. They've got a bunch of stuff in the beds you can customize and work with. And like I said, I think there's either electric or hybrid version. So we'll get the folks here from Tim Dolly Ford to give us the details on this pretty blue truck sitting in front of us. Last time I was out here, I think I did a segment. I made one of the guys do a segment with me in the truck. Maybe we'll talk someone into doing that with us today. First and foremost on this Friday, the NBA draft, the Utah Jazz, the selections that they made therein. Not only the talk of the town right now, but a lot of NBA draft talk centered around the Jazz, the talk of the NBA draft world this morning and the last few days. Brice, am going to try to talk some Jazz fans off the ledge in that regard, because I think it's more of a non-story than it's being made out to be. We're talking Ace Bailey. He's a top 5 pick. There was a lot of talk before that pick was made about him maybe not wanting to go to Utah, maybe not wanting to go to Charlotte, maybe not wanting to go to certain teams in the top 5, and he declined to go work out for all of these teams. It was a red flag for some teams. Some teams didn't bother him too much. Obviously for the Jazz, it was not enough for them. It was not enough to bother them from scaring them away from making the pick, and they get from a basketball perspective, probably one of the top 3 most talented prospects in the NBA draft. Is that kind of how you're feeling at this moment?
Yeah, no doubt about it. He's the best shooter that came into this NBA draft this year. And the Utah Jazz, I love what the front office did and Austin Ainge in that pick, just saying we don't care what all that noise is. We can't continue to get pushed around or have been pushed around in the past. We cannot be pushed around here, especially with this young man coming into this draft this year. And they put their foot down and said, we're going to take him and we'll see where the chips fall. And what happens? Well, it all turns out that the next day, and I'm going to place the blame on the ESPN pre-draft crew that was there, Jay Billis.
On an ESPN affiliate? You're calling out Jay Billis?
I'm doing it right here, right now, because the way that they presented that just made it 1,000 times worse than it actually needed to be. And the fact that they didn't know how the Jazz operate, it's not a surprise to me because the national talking heads don't pay attention to the Utah Jazz. But the way that they didn't know how the Utah Jazz operate with their rookies by getting them into a press conference the week after they get drafted, not the night after they get drafted, they created such a big non-story. Right. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and we'll get deep into this situation with one Andy Larson, and throughout the show we'll continue to talk about it and update you guys if we do find any updates there. But really, Brice, what this boils down to for me and from what I've been able to gather, I was at Zions Basketball Center on draft night. I talked to Ace Bailey. I talked to the Jazz staff. I talked to Austin Ainge. I don't think that much of this consternation is coming from Ace Bailey at all. This is a kid who wants to play basketball, wants to find a good position, wants to find a place where he can come in and, yes, contribute early. And that was part of the, I think, attempt. That was part of the thought process for his camp. Maybe trying to pull some strings before the draft to get where they wanted to go. Do I think that if Ace Bailey were picked to go somewhere, he's going to not show up and hold out as an 18-year-old who has no leverage? No, not at all. Unless he's getting the worst advice in NBA history, that's not going to happen. What I think is happening is he has given carte blanche to a guy in Omar Cooper who he's known for a long time, who's been representing him throughout a long process and is, well, doing something he's never done before. Omar Cooper has represented, I think, some high school kids with NIL stuff. To be honest with you, from what I've understood, even that got muddy. And, he's a guy with a long track record of having issues with a lot of the stuff that he's trying to deal with. And listen, you mentioned it before, legal issues. He's not a agent with the NBA. He's not certified as an agent with the NBA. So he's kind of using what are 2 certified agents listed for Ace Bailey to give some, backup, right? You have certified agents. You're being represented, but this guy gets to come in and do the bidding for you. That's not a place where, as an 18-year-old, you have any leverage. That's not a place where you should be trying to negotiate. These rookie contracts, these rookie-scale contracts are already in place. It's based on where you get drafted and if that team wants to give you a second contract. It's not based on your negotiations before the fact. So for me, I think this is a smaller situation than it's made out to be. And we're now seeing Omar Cooper, a guy who's not a certified agent in the NBA, making this a far more complicated process for Ace Bailey than it has to be. And I think a week, 2 weeks from now, when we're talking Summer League, we're not going to be talking about this much at all.
I want to be careful with what I say here, but this feels like when we talk about NIL contracts and these high school kids getting into these issues with agents that take 20, 30, 40% of the profits that they're making in their college contracts with name, image, and likeness, this kind of feels like it might have been like a predatory thing that happened. Someone stepped in early on in the in his high school career, said, hey, we can show you how it goes. Omar Cooper had a son, Sharif Cooper, who played and was drafted by the Hawks in 2022, currently plays overseas at the moment. This feels like something where, maybe Ace got into a situation where I don't know what his relationship is like with Omar Cooper, but it feels like something similar to that you would see with NIL agents that aren't necessarily agents who are, as we mentioned, certified in the NBA PA and different things like that, stepping in and kind of taking advantage of these young guys and their future.
Yeah, and for me, if I were those two certified agents that are listed as representatives of Ace Bailey, I'd be stepping in and saying, hey, dude, all right, you did your pre-draft thing. You were his NIL agent. You're also not a professional at this. Let us handle our business. Get the kid to camp on Monday. Go do your summer league thing and go from there, because there is no real benefit to trying to install leverage in a situation where you have none, which is what we're seeing here. And I think it's unfortunate because I think it's complicating the situation for Ace Bailey. It's creating a bunch of conversation for fans, and listen, it gives us something to talk about on the radio.
Sure.
But again, I think it is a much more of a nothing burger than it's being made out to be, thanks in part to what you mentioned, the coverage of it the other day on what is a TV show. Let's be clear, the NBA draft and what they do there. They're trying to make a TV show. And while we're at it, while they're trying to make that a TV show, they need to take cues from the NFL on making it a television product.
Yeah.
Because you watch the NBA draft and they're not processing the trades, so you're
makes it
confused.
10 times more confusing.
You have no idea who's picking where. You have no idea where the draft rights are going to these players. Even though the NBA knows, and it's all going on behind the scenes, you can upload a graphic and update it in real time on ESPN. We see it happen with the NBA, the NFL draft, and the NFL draft is a awesome TV product because of the way they put it out there. NBA needs to, I think, take some notes in that regard.
I agree 1,000% with you. And the minute that Kendrick Perkins, who was sitting up there on the panel, did not realize that Shams Charania just came on and said, this pick is going to the Utah Jazz from the Washington Wizards. They make the selection, and Kendrick Perkins goes off for 30 seconds to a minute on analysis of how well he's going to fit in Washington, Mr. Walter Clayton Jr. And then they have to correct him. Actually, he's going to Salt Lake City. He's going to Utah. That right there shows you it's too confusing. When you've got your analyst up there, make it a lot more simple. Take it from the NFL. Do whatever you have to do, but make it easier for everybody.
And to add on that, Kendrick Perkins for a little quick halftime show, I'm on board. For coverage, 3 hours of the NBA draft, count me out. Just to throw that out there. All right, more clarity on the NBA draft and the Jazz situation around Ace Bailey, Walter Clayton Jr., and they picked up a few other guys, of course, in the second round. John Tonje of Wisconsin, a player that, well, if you watched BYU in the tournament, you're pretty familiar with. R.J. Luis Jr. out of St. John's, and then Stephen Crowell, also out of Wisconsin. Those two undrafted, heading to the Jazz for I guess a tryout is basically what it is now, a two-way deal, some summer league, some G League stuff, and seeing if they can stick on a roster. More on the Jazz and NBA draft with Andy Larson coming up next. Chris Kamrani a little bit later on. Paul Pugmire, Utah Golf Radio with your PGA Tour leaderboard update and more. Still to come on the drive with this Friday edition. Larson and Larson, Porter and Brice, taking you through it at Tim Dolly Ford in Spanish Fork. It's 2534 North, 2nd East, timdollyford.com to check out their availability, the cars they have deals on right now, including the forever warranty and employee pricing, which is expiring this summer. Stop by and see them and tell them we sent you here at ESPN 700. Back on the other side with more of The Drive right here on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Welcome back in. Drive Time on a Friday afternoon. Utah's #1 sports talk. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, ESPN700sports.com. And if you want to check it out on YouTube, we're not in studio, so may not be the best viewing experience today, but when we're back in studio, you can watch us live on YouTube, ESPN 700 Sports Utah. Today, we're not in studio because we are live from, yes, you heard it right, Spanish Fork, 2534 North, 2nd East in Spanish Fork at Tim Dolly Ford. Forever warranty, employee pricing, and more. TimDollyFord.com to see the cars they have here in stock and just to check out some of their pricing and options. Of course, the Forever warranty, something you can't get just about anywhere else. Porter Larson, Brice Larson, no relation. And now joining us on the air, Andy Larson. And a little behind the scenes, our tech on site, Spencer, also a Larson of some kind, Step Larson.
No way.
So we've got a whole thing going on here.
A family reunion going on.
Andy Larson, how are you?
I'm good, fellow friends and family. Yeah, good to talk to you guys today.
Yeah, and none of us are related, allegedly. So appreciate you guys joining us. Appreciate Andy's time on this Friday. Andy, we talked about a little bit in the opening segment, of course, the Utah Jazz and the NBA draft. Not only the talk of the town, but kind of the conversation around some of draft circles in the league. I think a lot of that conversation has been overblown. I know you are in that camp as well. You and I were on site on draft night at Zion's basketball headquarters, and that's kind of the feel we got, is that the conversation around Ace Bailey is kind of happening without Ace Bailey. Give me your read. I won't speak for you, but the latest on the situation there, and we'll get to the other draft picks for the Jazz as well.
Yeah, look, the last hour has really cleared this up. So, you know, we heard from on draft day on Wednesday, we heard from Ace Bailey himself, like, yes, I'm focused on the basketball, you know, but knew the Jazz's starting lineup seemed to be excited to go to Utah. You know, said that it was his representation who was dealing kind of with all of the noise and rumors. And then, you know, it's been a difficult thing. So, like, he's got a manager, Omar Cooper, who has kind of represented him for the last few years in his high school and now, you know, college career, kind of steered him to Rutgers, to be sure, and was the guy that NBA teams were kind of dealing with most when it came to Ace Bailey. And it was pretty clear that he was trying to get him away from the Utah Jazz and to the Washington Wizards, the New Orleans Pelicans, or the Brooklyn Nets. And in the end, failed to do so, right? Like, in the end, went number 5 to Utah anyway. That being said, then his NBA Players Association certified agent, because Omar Cooper is not certified by the NBPA, went on Front Office Sports this morning and said, look, we love Ace in Utah. We think it's a good fit, and it just makes sense. Omar may have tried to steer him in a different direction, but we believe that it's a good fit for him in Utah. And then, you know, finally, about an hour ago, Omar Cooper on his Instagram posted a photo of Ace and said, let's go and tag the Utah Jazz. And finally, ESPN 5 minutes ago wrote an article that says, yes, Ace Bailey is reporting to the Jazz not only on Monday, but tomorrow. So this feels like it's been rectified. You know, like, I do think that Omar Cooper did not want Ace Bailey to be drafted by the Jazz. The Jazz took him anyway, and they are marching along maybe a little bit reluctantly, but certainly to Utah this weekend.
And as someone who is, you know, works in the college football sphere, I can tell you that this is not the first time or the last time we're going to be dealing with a situation like this, because I have, well, come in contact with a lot of these guys who are, I guess, agents now that are representing 16, 17, 18-year-olds and doing it a lot of times in bad faith, or just not doing it with any sort of professional experience, and it causes a lot of confusion and a lot of issues sometimes. Now, that all of that, I think, is for the most part behind us. Jonathan Givony a few minutes ago obviously released the quote from both the Jazz and representatives in the front office. We've had good communication with Ace Bailey and his representatives, and he is coming to Utah tomorrow, as Andy just laid out. Now, what about the player? Andy Larson. Ace Bailey, number 5 pick. A lot of folks before this thing started rolling had Ace higher than number 5 on a lot of the mock draft picks, and a lot of folks in Jazz camp seemed to be pretty happy that he was still there at number 5. What are they getting in the player, Ace Bailey? A pretty high upside from what it appears, and a really, really good score.
Yeah, look, it's worth noting that, like, look, he didn't just fall because of the Omar Cooper situation, right? Like, that wasn't the reason he went to 5. It was there is some on-court stuff there, too, that teams are worried about. But he is a tremendous shooter, and can get to his shot as well as any prospect we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years, right? Like, his ability to get his kind of act together for his gather and shoot over the top of people and make those shots is incredible. For him to make 46% of his mid-range shots at Rutgers with the defensive attention he got, with the kinds of shots he took, it's awesome. To compare it, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander also shot 46% from mid-range last year, and the NBA defenders will be longer, but it is clearly going to be the basis of his game. And then, I think it's fair to say that he needs to work on the other stuff. Maybe could make it a little bit easier on himself by not settling for those mid-rangers and instead getting to the rim more often, maybe tightening up his handle, maybe getting a little bit lower or stronger on those drives so he can get all the way to the rim. A little bit better in kind of the three-point range and kind of getting off the ball a little bit more would probably benefit his efficiency. And then being a more consistent defender and being a more consistent playmaker are key steps. So Austin Ains talked about his rebounding, which was very good. And I do think he shows defensive flashes. He's athletic as all get out. It just needs to be a little bit more consistent. So, look, the thing is he's 18 years old, and he doesn't turn 19 until August. So he is absolutely not a finished product yet, absolutely a little bit of a project there, but the ability to make shots at that high of a level is really, really hard to find and will be the basis for his game moving forward in the NBA.
Yeah, Andy, I'm curious about the attitude of the front office of the Utah Jazz now. With Austin Ainge in there, it felt like there were some reports out there that said with this pick of Ace Bailey, even though there were maybe some of those red flags, it was kind of the front office and Austin Ainge saying, we really don't care. We're going to do what's best for the Utah Jazz, and we'll figure all of that out later on down the road. Is that the feeling that you're getting here with this pick of Ace Bailey, or was there more behind the scenes that we just don't know of in terms of how those interviews went and different things like that?
No, 100% you're right. It is, yeah, look, they were willing to deal with kind of the weird agent stuff because he is a good talent. And frankly, they believe he's a good kid too, right? Like, if you kind of ignore the Omar Cooper situation, everything else is fine from he wants to work hard. He is in the gym all the time by all accounts. He's a really positive kid. He's, I think, a little bit like naive in some ways, right? Like, and again, he's just 18, and maybe that's what happens when you've been kind of lauded as the next NBA star your whole life. And so I think there is some like maturing to do there, but like I don't think that he's definitely not a bad kid, right? Like, and so I think that's important to say. And so they, the Jazz believe not only in his game, but his personality as well, kind of shining through and kind of maturing over the next few years to kind of fill his own shoes, the shoes that his talent provides. So, I think the Jazz saw some of those concerns, but look, the overall package on and off the court was strong enough for them to feel he was the best pick.
Andy, everyone in the Jazz HQ room there, while we were awaiting the next selection for the Jazz, we all kind of thought that there was a good likelihood of the team moving up, around 15 to 20. And obviously the assets that they have make that a high possibility. Well, they did so, and they did so for one Walter Clayton Jr., a player who, if you watch the NCAA tournament in much detail, well, you heard his name and you saw his play quite a bit. Another guy who can fill up the stat sheet, especially on the offensive end. What do they get in Walter Clayton Jr., and what does this trend between the first two picks going pretty shot maker heavy say about the Jazz strategy this offseason?
Yeah, another very good shooter, but in a very different way than Ace Bailey, right? Where like Ace Bailey is kind of that tough mid-range shot maker. Imagine Kevin Durant but shorter. Imagine a Carmelo Anthony almost. I think Walter Clayton Jr. is much more of a guard scoring, a three-point shooting guard that we've seen in the modern NBA. These are crazy comparisons, but the Steph Curry, the Damian Lillard, the Jalen Brunson, the guy who's going to take a lot of shots on the perimeter, use kind of quick movements and hesitation moves to get himself open for those threes down. He made 39% of his threes last year. He took so many of them. Obviously was the most outstanding player in the NCAA tournament last year as Florida won the national title. Was a transfer from Iona and has kind of grown his game that way into being more of a point guard, which standing at 6'2", he probably does have to play at the NBA level. But just the shot making, the ability to get into his shot and make them is really that is the number one skill for NBA guards today. And Walter Clayton has that in spades. He's 22. He's much older than Ace Bailey. Kind of the rare senior prospect drafted in the first round. But the Jazz felt his shooting ability and, again, kind of that winning player status it meant that he had a lot to offer. And I tend to agree with him. When I watched the film, I came away really pleasantly surprised with how viable his NBA game looked, because you do worry about kind of how shorter guards can translate into the league.
I always look at how players play and perform specifically in the college basketball tournament, specifically in March Madness, is kind of a litmus test for their readiness for what is a much more serious form of basketball. Obviously, the level of talent, the level of athlete you face in the NBA is a step above. But what does his performance specifically in the NCAA tournament tell you about maybe his NBA readiness as a prospect?
Yeah, I think seniors can go one of two ways, right? Like it can be that you are, beating everyone else and being the best player on the floor because of your athletic gifts, because you are simply stronger and more mature than the other players on the court. Or it can be, hey, you have developed those skills to the point where they are NBA ready, and you are just showing it against worse competition. And I think Walter Clayton, in the eyes of most NBA, scouts, and I think in my view as well, is one of those guys that should translate well to the NBA, because it wasn't that like his physical gifts were allowing him to overpower other guys. It was that his quickness and his shot making and his overall skill was allowing him to overpower other guys. And that should translate. You can still get off like those hesitation step backs in the NBA. You can still kind of get players off balance in the NBA. You can make the right reads in the NBA, right? Like, I think a lot of what Walter Clayton does translate. Now, look, there are still questions, and he's still the 18th pick, right, where, like, the success rate is 50-50 here, and we will learn a lot about whether or not this will work in Summer League coming up in the next couple of weeks. But I understand why the Jazz are so high on him, because, yes, the experience level is there, but, like, and that can be a double-edged sword. But I think in this particular case, especially given how young the rest of the Jazz are, it can really help them.
Yeah, Andy, you brought up Summer League, and I'm curious, for fans that don't really pay attention or maybe don't go into Summer League understanding what to look for, what do you look for in terms of guys that go in there, and is it purely just statistical output, or is it what are you looking for in terms of guys that are going to make an impact for their team when they go out and perform in Summer League?
Yeah, I'm watching a lot, and there's been some really good research done on this that shows that Summer League is really meaningful, right? Like, guys who do well in Summer League do correlate well with guys who do well in the NBA. And so I'm looking for, first of all, just level of play, right? Like, if you are struggling in Summer League, it is a bad sign. We have seen Jazz rookies, even Jazz sophomores, struggle in Summer League. If you're not dominating, that level of competition by year 2 or year 3, you may not be an NBA player. And then, I'm looking for kind of development of micro skills, right? Like, this is such a useful time for players to learn what it is that they are good at and can bring to a near NBA level, and what it is that they need to work on, right? That may have worked for them in college and just isn't going to fly in NBA spacing, NBA refereeing, and so on and so forth, right? Like, So some of that can be you may have to attack the rim differently. You may have to finish at the rim differently. Your ball handling has to be much tighter. You have to make much better reads. I mean, there's so much the defensive game gets so much harder when you're playing against constantly big dudes, and switching out and all that kind of stuff. So I'm watching for all those kind of like little micro skills that do add up to a good player. I mean, I think we saw the difference in kind of having a well-rounded player in these NBA finals, right? Where if both the Pacers and the Thunder played really good team basketball, didn't have a lot of weaknesses 1 through 5 in their starting lineups, and it allowed them to get to the NBA finals in the first place.
And you mentioned, obviously, there's a correlation between when you have success in the summer league, probably means you're on a level above some of the players around you. And there's even more of a correlation when you look deeper into it. If you do struggle in summer league, it obviously is somewhat of a red flag. Now, there are outliers, there are exceptions. Spence always likes to bring up when I think it was John Amici who played Tim Duncan super well in the summer league. It actually made him look bad in some ways. So there's always going to be an outlier. There's always going to be an exception to the rule. But you really want summer league looks to be really strong ones from your rookies if they are to be contributors at the NBA level. All right, Andy, moving along with the Jazz draft picks, we talked about Ace Bailey, of course, a top 5 guy. Talked about Walter Clayton Jr. out of Florida. Both of those guys familiar with in a lot of ways if you're watching the NCAA tournament. This guy's no different. John Tonji out of Wisconsin. He had a phenomenal showing against the BYU Cougars in the NCAA tournament. What kind of player are the Jazz getting in a second-round late draft pick, 53?
Yeah, look, I think you saw a lot of that in that BYU game in the second round. Like, scored 37 points that game, had 16 free throws. It was an efficient score that game and really almost kind of single-handedly brought Wisconsin to almost winning that game. I think, that's kind of what he brings with the NBA. Another good shot maker, probably not as good as the guys in the first round, but certainly someone who can make an open shot. And then it's kind of about whether or not he will be able to bring his gifts, be able to hang athletically against bigger players, right? Like, he's not just 22, he's 24. He's a super senior. Last year was his 6th year in college. So all of a sudden it will be different for him around bigger NBA bodies. The foul drawing when you're the biggest guy on the court is easier than when you're the smaller or, you're just another guy out there. And I think that's probably the concern for John Tonje and why he slipped to 53. But you can believe that he can be a useful kind of rotation wing player in the NBA because he can make shots and he does try defensively. And maybe, again, the speed and athleticism washes him out. Could totally see that happening. But I understand why the Jazz made the bet that they did at 53 because he does have just like I don't want to say a 3-and-D wing skill set because he's not, a top-level shooter and he's not a top-level defender even at the college level. But you can imagine him kind of working his game into that, becoming, a minutes eater wing that's a really useful figure in today's league.
All right, Andy. Obviously, the Jazz wrapped up their draft selections with those 3 guys, but they got a R.J. Luis Jr. out of St. John's. This is a player who our guy, Gordy Chiesa, actually mentioned as a possibility to look at 53. Well, the Jazz got him without having to take a draft pick and added Steven Crowell out of Wisconsin as well. A short look at those 2 players, Andy, what their expectations may be as far as being on the Summer League roster, 2-way deals, and if you think there are, usually you look at undrafted guys as 2-way players as maybe bit pieces, but hey, is one of these guys someone you're a little higher on?
Yeah, I mean, R.J. Lewis Jr. I think was a super draftable guy and was projected to be taken in most mocks. And my draft model liked him as a second-round pick as well because of his production at St. John's, and I think what that team did last year as well. A little bit of a similar story as Sanjay, just kind of different bodies, but like you would have liked to see, had he been more efficient offensively, I think Lewis is definitely drafted. Kind of that was the question, is kind of struggled to make easy looks in college, but still was very productive, scored, I think it was 17 points a game. Like was one of the best college basketball players last year. And defensively, he really gets after it. I think that's where he can contribute probably most in the NBA right away is defensively. But he'll be a two-way, so he's going to be spending probably most of his year in the G League and trying to show that he's a step above everyone else in the G League to get a call up from the Jazz. And then, the other two guys that they picked up are summer league rotation spots, right? Like they are guys who the Jazz will give a look at and probably end up on the bench in summer league. And, those guys can maybe get camp invites and then maybe summer league SLC Stars invites, G League invites, and kind of work their way up in the roster and start their professional careers. But, they won't be on two-way contracts. They won't be part of the Jazz unless they really, really, really surprisingly impress in a way that we haven't seen players do for the Jazz in the last 10 or 15 years, signed to Exhibit 10 deals.
All right, Andy, dates to look forward to, obviously free agency, summer league, and then before we know it, we'll be talking about some preseason basketball. What's the next date circled on your calendar, and where can folks find coverage of it?
Yeah, look, I mean, the Ace Bailey and Walter Clayton introductory press conference, I think John Tonja will be there too, is coming up this weekend. I anticipate either Sunday or Monday, but we'll see. So that's a big date. And then obviously June 30th is also a big date because it's the start of the NBA's free agent period. And while there aren't big free agency names necessarily out there, and the Jazz wouldn't get them anyway, and heck, even if they could and the free agent wanted to, the Jazz also don't have any cap space and don't have any roster space. You're talking about the, kind of mid-level exception, realistically, if the Jazz do want to do anything in free agency, or they have to make trades, right? And we could see that happen as well for John and Jordan Collins and, Jordan Clarkson, John Collins, and Colin Sexton. So anyway, that's all coming up this weekend, and I'll keep my eyes on what the Jazz are doing. Then obviously July 5th is the start of the Utah Jazz Summer League. So it's all happening right now.
And Andy will have the latest on all of it at Andy B. Larson on the pages of the Salt Lake Tribune. I guess on the web pages of the Salt Lake Tribune now. Appreciate his time as always. Andy, enjoy your weekend, and we'll chat some free agency and off-season stuff soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Porter.
Andy was he was going to be on remote with me, but couldn't make it out of Spanish Fork.
A little bit of a drive out here.
Bummer. We are in Spanish Fork for a good reason, though. Tim Dolly Ford out here at 2534 North, 2nd East in Spanish Fork. It's timdollyford.com. Forever warranty, employee pricing, and they got a deal on the Bronco right now that's a special as well. So if any of that interests you, come in, check them out. The #1 used car dealer franchise in Utah, over 1,300 vehicles, including hundreds of EVs. The time to buy is now, whether it's tariffs, supply chain issues, inflation. Car prices are always going up, just like real estate, so the time to buy is almost always now, because later it's going to go up. So 2534 North, 2nd East in Spanish Fork. It's timdollyford.com. Forever warranty, employee pricing. Those are the things they are really pushing right now. The forever warranty is something you're not going to get really anywhere else. When you buy a car here, they service it for free for life and have a big, big drivetrain warranty as well. Our guy Steve will give you the details on that a little bit later on. Back on the other side, it's Chris Kamrani of The Athletic. We'll talk some college football. We'll talk some soccer and more on The Drive with Porter Larson, Brice Larson, Larson edition on a Friday on Utah's #1 sports talk. Utah's #1 sports talk. It's ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, and, of course, ESPN700sports.com. Welcome back inside Drive Time on ESPN 700. It is Utah's number one sports talk, 92.1 FM, ESPN700sports.com, or wherever you happen to podcast, Breaker, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever it may be. Just search The Drive with Spence Checketts. Search ESPN 700. Rate, review, subscribe, do all the things. It does actually help out the show. Live at Tim Daly Ford, out here in Spanish Fork. It's timdalyford.com for information on their employee pricing, which is ticking. The clock is ticking on that employee pricing. A forever warranty and a deal on the new Bronco today as well at timdalyford.com. 2534 North, 2nd East here in Spanish Fork. You can't miss it, just right off the freeway. We are switching gears here in this 3 o'clock hour, talking a little bit with Chris Kamrani of The Athletic. CK, weekly chat. Appreciate you for stopping by. How are you, friend?
Happy Friday, man. How we doing?
Doing well. Appreciate you for joining us, of course, as you do each and every week. A lot to kind of get to and cover, but I wanted your thoughts. I know you don't cover the NBA, but I'm sure you saw the sports world kind of going back and forth on the Jazz and the Ace Bailey situation, the agent who has been involved with him. And it does have a tie-in, I think, with college sports and with NIL, because this is a guy who's been representing him through that process. And, Chris, it's an agent who is not licensed and not experienced in this field, and it's something I see quite a bit of in today's college football world. So I wonder how you kind of consumed that news cycle, knowing what you do know already on the college side of this.
Yeah, much of the last year I've spent, researching and trying to dive into the world of NIL agents at the college level, mainly college football, but even you're seeing that expand into college basketball, softball, baseball, gymnastics. It is a wide-ranging kind of area that people who fashion themselves as agents have been able to kind of get their hooks into players and their families. And it seems to be that the Ace Bailey situation is something that has been percolating, for a while. I think there were a lot of reasons why people might have had some red flags regarding Ace during the pre-draft process. And listen, we can, hem and haw all we want. I think eventually this will die down. As soon as, the Jazz get Ace in town with Walter Clayton Jr. and the other dude they drafted and hold up the jerseys, I think it'll be put behind them. But it is an unnecessary kind of distraction for a franchise that generally prides itself on being fairly low key. But that is the business that you choose when you are getting into the world of drafting high profile players. And this is not something that happens very often in basketball. We see it in football quite a bit when some players are trying to maybe steer where they'd like to go. But it seems like Ace and his family have been steered wrongly by the folks who are, quote unquote, managing his day-to-day operations. But as you saw, the head of the agency went on, I think, with Front Office Sports this morning to do some damage control and said Ace is stoked to be going to Utah. And frankly, like, if you're a guy like Ace Bailey who wants to be able to put up 20 shots a game, and what I think the Jazz envision him as, early on in his career, Utah probably makes sense, because if he would have gone to a place like Philly or somewhere else, probably not going to get as many shots, or the offense won't revolve around you the way it probably will when he gets to Utah.
Now, I'm going to follow up here with the agent stuff, because the one thing about the NBA that I think kind of helped this situation along and only last a few days is that, well, you do have to have agents that are certified. Ace Bailey has a couple of those, and I feel like maybe voices who know what they're doing kind of stepped in at a certain point and clarified this whole thing. Well, that doesn't exist at the college football level yet. Now, we have a revenue sharing agreement. We have some clarity in college sports, but none of it is in the NIL and agency space. How muddy is that going to continue to get, knowing that there's still a lot to figure out legally, rule whatever the NCAA decides to do as far as enforcement goes.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to a topic that we've been covering on the show for years now. It's until there is um, a database where people can, officially become licensed, and until they register themselves, until they take the proper course trainings the same way so many people have to, you're going to see folks who fashion themselves as agents when they are not necessarily always acting on the best interest of the athlete. And granted, I think that those bad actors are in the minority, but like what can't go like unnoticed or not talked about is the fact that so many of these quote unquote agents are taking such a high clip from so many of these college athletes in the NIL world, because a lot of these athletes don't know what the normal prerequisite take home is for an agent. Like a story I did on the world of NIL agents last spring, like there were guys that say they take as much as 20% from a college athlete, and not everybody is making AJ Dubance money. Like some guys are making 10,000, 5,000, 100,000, and like, not to say that that's not nothing, but 20%, when more often than not all these guys are doing is facilitating something fairly easy and something that a lot of people could do. It is a world that needs to be regulated, and I don't know, now that we're entering this new realm of revenue sharing, and NIL will still be part of the conversation because it's going to be its own separate entity now away from the school. I wonder if the NCAA, if they're going to have the wherewithal to try to tackle the issues that have clearly been, rising to the surface at the college level the last couple of years.
And not only that, I've heard of stories of kids who have these quote-unquote agents in college, and they're not NFL PA certified guys. So they go to those student athletes and they say, hey, let's get into the transfer portal every single year of their contract that they're a college football player, so that they can get that 20% cut every single year that they make a new deal for these guys, and kind of just get as much out of them as they can while they're still their agent in college. Just a crazy world that we see. Chris, I want to shift over and talk about Sacramento State and what's going on with the Pac-12, with them adding Texas State as well. What you were able to talk to a couple of officials there at Sac State. So give us kind of the background of what they're looking at and trying to go FBS Division I football. And then give us a little bit of background on what we saw with the move to Texas State and the Pac-12 reaching out to them. And are they connected in any sort of way?
They are and they aren't at the same time, if that makes sense. I mean, like, you're seeing the Group of Five level, and the Pac-12 is now the Group of Five level. The Mountain West and the Pac-12, the newly minted Pac-12, be the last kind of two conferences that are trying to sew up their long-term plans in the wake of the massive conference realignment that started really 3 years ago. And the Pac-12 went out and poached some Mountain West Conference teams, and they're planning on adding Texas State, which is an interesting addition, considering the geographical name of the Pac-12. But obviously we know that means nothing with Cal and Stanford being part of the Atlantic Coast Conference. Nothing really matters on that front anymore. It's who makes the most sense for your bottom line. Texas State has been a successful football program in recent years at the level that they've been competing at, and the tie-in with Sacramento State is Sacramento State has a very ambitious school president who is a two-time alumni, who, once he was hired a few years ago, realized that the in his mind, the most optimal way to get Sacramento State on the map nationwide is to increase its athletic footprint. And Sacramento is such a fascinating place for a multitude of reasons. You're near the Bay Area, but you're not in the Bay Area. It's kind of like a Salt Lake. It's a small, big town. It has an NBA team, but they're the biggest media market in the country, guys, without an FBS program, which is crazy to think. I mean, they're a top 20 media market and they don't have an FBS program. But the problem for Sacramento State is the NCAA doesn't want to greenlight anybody who isn't part of an existing G5 or P4 conference to join the FBS. And Sacramento State's been at the FCS level now for 30 years. And the Sacramento State, through its leadership, filed a waiver to the NCAA Division I Council asking them to make a special exception for them. And they want the NCAA to believe in all the aspirations that they have. They hired Brendan Marion, who was one of the top offensive coordinators at the G5 level last year for UNLV, helping them get to back-to-back Mountain West Conference title games. They hired Sacramento royalty and Mike Bibby. We all know that they were in talks with Michael Vick last year before he took the Norfolk State job. Hired Shaq as an unpaid volunteer general manager. So it's a very small, obscure school that's making moves at a time when, if you want to be relevant, you kind of have to be loud and you have to be kind of braggadocious about what you want to do. But unfortunately for them, like the NCAA Division I Council denied their waiver request. So 2025 will be their last year in the Big Sky Conference. And, folks like myself and Stuart Mandel and Chris Vanini and reported that, that they've made overtures to the Mountain West Conference as a potential, late stage addition to try to get to the FBS football level starting in 2026. But as of right now, they don't have their, ducks in a row, so to speak, to be able to achieve the goal that they set out for themselves so loudly recently.
Yeah, it seems like you hired a bunch of business guys, and they recognized the market they're in and kind of went all in on making this a Division I product with Division I type personalities and people at the helm, and the actual practice of that takes more time on the academic side than it does on the business side, and they're kind of running into the complications there. I do wonder, Chris, change in college sports and change in sports in general is a constant. It is something we cannot avoid. It's something that will always be part of sports. But in the college sports world, it does at least seem like historically there's been peaks and valleys there, right, where you have a bunch of realignment, you have a bunch of rule changes, and then there's a little catch your breath. It feels normal. It feels the same for a while. We went through the BCS era. We went through the P5 era. Those felt like eras. Now we're in a moment, Chris, where it seems like regardless of the day, regardless of the week, it's just pure chaos. It's waiting on court rulings. It's waiting on the next realignment news to drop. It's waiting on the next, big NIL drama or controversy to drop. I know that this is not new in college sports, but it feels a lot more like this is the normal, and that we aren't going to be reverting back to one of those times that I mentioned. How used to this are we going to have to get?
You'll have to get used to it, and it's become cyclical, and I don't know if it's going to have. I don't know if the cycle is going to be broken until the powers that be decide that there is a top-down power structure and that there's a regulated set of rules in place, and these are the A, B, C, D, and rules that people need to follow. Until then, it's going to be chaos because more often than not, the power brokers, the people who can swing the haymakers behind the scenes, they have the most power and they make the most money, and it doesn't behoove everyone else to have a regulated system when the folks that bring in the most money for college athletics, the two major power conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten, have the ability to kind of sway which direction the future of college football especially goes.
When we zoom in locally, Utah, BYU, they have had different approaches to a lot of the way they go after prospects and the way they're recruiting. What is your read on where BYU and Utah, and we'll get into maybe some of the smaller schools that are also dealing with realignment and this chaos as well. What is your read on how both Utah and BYU are handling this chaos of the offseason, and where they are positioned today, Chris, to capitalize on what we saw last week, which is a revenue-sharing agreement that is now in place, $20.5 million directly from the school to players. It seems like that will help with some of the, very baseline, right? Your scholarships, your Dodge Ram deals, that kind of thing. It's all of the other stuff. It's the boosters, it's the fundraising, the stuff on top of that. How is BYU and Utah set up as of today to capitalize on that?
Well, from a pure revenue sharing standpoint, everybody gets the same amount. So if you're going to distill it down to Utah versus BYU doesn't have to necessarily explore or publicly, explore how they're going to dissect everything to the public because they're a private institution. Utah, on the other hand, does, because you can be able to request a Freedom of Information Act or a grammar request to the school because they're a public institution. It sounds like, based on me reading some press releases and stories in local media, Mark Harlan and those folks up at the U will eventually do that. I don't know when that's going to come down. But ultimately, guys, this is how athletic departments are going to be judged, like basically on a success level. Like previously it was wins and losses. Now it's wins and losses, as well as how you decide to distribute your $20.5 million, how much you're going to give to football, basketball, women's sports, Olympic sports. Utah's a very unique school in that you have a sport like gymnastics that has been filling its basketball center full of fans for decades now, whereas the basketball product hasn't been doing that. So how does Mark Harlan and his team decide to split up a large portion of that $20.5 million to a sport that has been a revenue generator, unlike the normal revenue generated sports like basketball? For BYU, it's I would imagine like every other school, a lot of it will go to football, but BYU is unique in that they've had a lot of boosters and donors in that NIL realm be able to already make a massive historic impact on the basketball side. So if you're BYU, if you're Brian Santiago, do you tell those donors, please keep donating to the basketball team? That way we can find a way to relay more money to the football team because there's more players, more need there. We're very much in the infancy stages of knowing how this will all shake out. There are rival schools that have a lot in common, but they have a lot not in common. And the fact that BYU doesn't have to necessarily disclose how they're going to go about it might make this conversation a little more difficult to really dive into as we move along.
I'm curious to know a little bit more about the contracts that are being signed between schools and these players in terms of revenue sharing agreements, and whether or not there's the availability to go with multiple year contracts to keep these guys from just jumping into the transfer portal afterwards. And then also in that same space, if a contract is broken, will we see a school go after a player in the court systems and sue? And it gets really messy after that, because we've seen Wisconsin as they're getting ready and preparing and trying to sue Miami for poaching one of their players. I'm curious if you've heard anything in that space in terms of those contracts and some of the specifics that are going on between these players and schools.
I haven't heard specific regarding anything contract-wise, but I would assume that, and this is my total assumption, it would probably make sense for all parties to go on a year-by-year basis to start. Depending on the position, depending on the caliber profile of player. I don't think the revenue sharing system will necessarily immediately change every player is basically a free agent at the start of every new season or off season, but I could be wrong. I don't know. I think, like I said, we're very much in the infancy stages of learning how all this stuff is going to shake out, but I don't think we're out of the woods when it comes to, schools doing the Spider-Man meme at each other and pointing at each other and say, you did this, no, you did this. I think that's going to continue to happen because, again, going back to what we were talking about a minute ago, there is no regulation in this realm. So people can kind of do what they want and they'll let sleeping dogs lie. Ultimately, and the NCAA or whomever is going to be in charge of this whole thing has to get their hands around it, because this, like Porter mentioned earlier, it just adds another potential chapter of chaos as we enter this new realm of revenue sharing.
Well, and Chris, we've entered a place where the NCAA has lost a lot of credibility. They, number one, were illegally operating in antitrust territory for however long. When this body, whatever it looks like, comes down that is able to put some organization, some regulations down, what does the enforcement look like to all of these schools who now, if you're in the Big Ten, if you're in the SEC, you kind of think you run the show?
Well, you absolutely do, because it's, the first rule of the drive, Porter. The man with the gold makes the rules,
There you
and
go.
nobody has more gold right now than those two conferences. And just look at what happened the last couple of months. Like, they're basically driving, potential change for them getting more automatic qualifying bids for the future playoff system, whether it stays at 12 or goes to 14 or 16. Like, there's no reason for them to currently want to open up more seats at the table to people that they believe to be less powerful or less impactful than they are. Granted, that could it should, and it could change if you have a power structure in place where somebody says these are the rules, you have to follow this blueprint, or else you're going to be dinged, you're going to be fined, you're going to be this, that, or the other. But until then, these guys are calling the shots, and whether people in the Big 12 or in the ACC, whether they want to be up in arms about it or not, that's just the reality everyone faces right now.
What do you see as the next? I don't want to say seismic shift, but it does feel like with the Pac-12, the new iteration of the Pac-12, with a little less chatter around ACC instability. Obviously, the teams that did join the Big Ten last year, it does feel like we're at least pausing on a little bit of that news. What do you think happens next now that we've seen some teams sign their contracts for new conferences in the last couple of weeks? Is it the ACC? Is it the Big 12? Where do you see the next big change? And I'll leave it to some of the bigger schools and definitely Division I.
That's a tough question. I mean, if I'm going low hanging fruit, I think the easy one is, I think you'll see continued playoff expansion. I think that's the first one. But when it comes to conference realignment, I think like what you said, Porter, you'll have a kind of a lying low within the next 3 to 4 years, and then we'll have another group of schools who decide that they want to chase the dollar bills, and I don't know who that is. I don't know if that's some folks in the Big Ten wanting to offer some schools that they were maybe interested in the previous cycle, or the ACC realizing that it doesn't make sense at all to have two teams in the Bay Area be part of an Atlantic-based conference. Maybe they want them to leave and have them join another conference, join the Pac-12 or whatever. But I honestly don't know what schools could potentially move, because I don't know how many true power players are out there right now for the Big Ten and the SEC to really make a move toward. Like, if we're gonna be simple and say, like, if you want to chase the money, yeah, the SEC could go after a school like Texas Tech, which is, spending oil money at a clip that no other school in the conference or in the country can. But beyond a school like that, I just don't necessarily see really anybody else out there that's going to be that appetizing for those two power conferences right now.
Health of the Big 12. Obviously, Utah and BYU have found themselves firmly together in this conference for I'll say short term, because we just don't know going forward. What does the Big 12 partnership with both these two schools locally look like long term, and how healthy do you think that conference is in football and basketball, and then probably more generically or generally some of the other Olympic sports and whatnot?
Well, I think in basketball it should be fine. Men's basketball, it's proven to be one of the best conferences in the country. Football is a total coin flip, because I think basically Utah thought it was leaving the Pac-12 for something different, and it basically joined a newer version of the Pac-12, whereas the Big 12 just basically cannibalizes itself every year. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe ASU comes out this year and proves that they're going to be the dominant program of the conference. I don't see that being the case. I just think there is no preeminent program right now that's going to instill fear in the other two conferences, even the ACC. Like I don't think even like a Clemson or a Florida State is shaking in their boots thinking of the prospect of playing a BYU or a Utah or Colorado or Kansas State or Iowa State. It's just for Utah and BYU, I'm of the opinion it makes sense for you to be in lockstep with your rival in any conference that you choose because it benefits everybody involved. But the long-term effects of where the Big 12 is going when it comes to our two local schools, who knows? Brett Yormark has been very bombastic and very forward-facing, saying that he believes that the Big 12 is going to rival the Big 10 and the SEC in the coming years. But I kind of have to see it to believe it first. And so far, I haven't seen anything concrete enough for me to say like the Big 12 is making inroads in terms of potentially dethroning the two power conferences we've been talking about.
Yeah, as long as there's this like hegemonic power battle going on between SEC, Big Ten, we're just going to have to look at everyone else as, waiting that out and seeing how it unfolds. Because obviously, if those two leagues expand or turn into something else entirely, you're going to be, you're going to want to be in on that ship, regardless of how healthy the Big 12 is, and regardless of how healthy the Big 12 basketball is. Football is kind of seemingly the decider when it comes to this conference stuff. CK, appreciate your time as always. We'll check in with you next week. I'm sure catch up with Spence. Let the folks know what they can look forward to. Any feature stories, any interesting stuff coming up in the doldrums of summer?
Yes, there is, but nothing I can tease currently because it's very much in the early stages. But definitely stuff we'll be talking about soon enough.
Did you see that one Trevor Riley had been named the GM of a local, I guess, prep college adjacent program here in town?
I did. I need to get in contact with our guy to see what that job and what that team entails. It seems like there's always a new pop-up semi-pro football program in the state, and I know everybody misses the Stallions, including Trevor. So I'll have to figure out what he's doing with this new venture.
Yeah, that'll be interesting, as all conversations with Trevor Riley are. Hopefully we'll get him on the station sometime soon as well. It's Chris Kamrani of The Athletic, at Chris Kamrani, of course, easy way to find him. The Athletic, go there, subscribe, and support our colleagues there. CK, appreciate your time. Enjoy your weekend.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Back on the other side, we have a PGA Tour leaderboard update. Paul Pugmire of Utah Golf Radio will join the show. We still have a college football and college sports at large conversation with our friend Matt Brown still to come. Of course, Matt Brown of Extra Points and extrapoints.com. He is the conversation we just had with Chris, a little bit on the business side, the off the field, off the court side of college sports. There's no one better in the business than Matt Brown. Maybe Chris Kamrani.
Yeah.
We got the two best guys to talk about it between Chris of The Athletic and Matt of Extra Points. You've got Matt on a bunch on your side. He's got some interesting Utah County connections and interests there, yeah?
Yeah, no doubt about it. Every morning, 7 to 10 a.m., 103.9 and 98.3 ESPN The Fan on Brice Bianucci. We do have him on quite often to talk about those things. If you want to know like the details of some random contract somewhere, even if it's about a video game like College Football 25, Matt Brown's the guy to do it with.
The stuff we just talked about with Chris is very good about talking about it like philosophically, right?
Yeah.
What it means for your team, how it is a story, and how it connects with stuff. Matt is going to tell you like exactly the process, the court filings, the timing behind it, all of the above. So it'll be interesting to catch up with Matt. We still have our friends from the Ute Stampede Rodeo coming by a little bit later on, and more still to come on The Drive with, well, Porter Larson and Brice Larson. Larson and Larson edition of the program today on this Friday afternoon. Brought to you today by Utah Elite Services. With summer here, it is the perfect time to be introducing you to our new partner on the ESPN Sports Radio Network. Utah Elite Services is a Utah-grown asphalt maintenance and concrete repair company. Whether it's rain, snow, wind, and now this heat, your concrete has been through a bunch. Any cracks, extreme damage that need to be fixed, give Utah Elite Services a call. Corey and his team will help you out. It's 801-821-8670. That's 801-821-8670. 8670 for a no cost, no obligation estimate at Utah Elite Services. Corey and the folks will hook you up. Tell them we sent you from ESPN 700. On the other side, we're going to update you on the PGA Tour, a leaderboard update from our friend Paul Pugmire of Utah Golf Radio. Matt Brown still to come. It is The Drive. No Spence Checketts today. I'm Porter Larson, Brice Larson, with me until 6 o'clock right here on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, and ESPN700sports.com. About halfway through a Friday edition of The Drive here on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, and of course ESPN 700sports.com. I am Porter Larson, Brice Larson along the ride. Brice Larson with an O, Porter with an E. No relation, but a good buddy of mine. And actually the first time I think we've hosted a day show on this station together.
Yeah, I think it is.
We worked together for years, but Brice, of course, for those the fan listeners, usually covering stuff on this side of the point of the mountain.
That's
we
right.
are in Spanish Fork. And, of course, my coverage usually sticks into Salt Lake City and that area. So some overlap today with Larson and Larson. And, of course, it's appropriate that we are out here in Spanish Fork. 2534 North, 2nd East, timdalyford.com. It is Utah's #1 used car dealer, over 1,300 vehicles, including hundreds of EVs. And here at this Ford location, they've got a forever warranty, employee pricing, a deal on the new Bronco, and more. So stop by, say hello, tell the folks at Tim Daly Ford that we at ESPN 700 and Broadway Media sent you. And, hey, maybe they'll hook you up on your newest ride. This segment, we take a little break from the college football and the hoops discussion with a PGA Tour leaderboard update brought to you by our friends at Uinta Golf and the Utah Golf Association. As we do each and every week, we welcome in our friend Paul Pugmire. No one better to talk local golf with than our friend Pugs. How are you, my friend?
I am good. I'm good, Porter. But listen, you and Brice are two of my faves. I want you to be the Larson brothers.
There you go. There you go. We're brothers in Broadway media of some form.
That works.
Appreciate you joining us, Paul.
Yeah.
Are you a big golf guy, Brice? Do you play golf?
Oh yeah. I've got a tee time coming up on Saturday.
I was going to say, I know you're. I've seen at least you out on a course at some point. So this is going to be a good little discussion here.
Might not be popular with this audience, but I was at the BYU Media Golf event on Monday. Actually went pretty well.
We were at, I think, maybe the same day even. Kyle Van Noy had his golf event down in St. George. So a lot of golf on the station over the last week. And, of course, in the summer during the PGA season when things are heating up, we will talk a lot of golf. Now, not a lot of local interest this week at the Rocket Classic. We do have Patrick Fishburne in action. Paul, what are you watching at the Detroit Golf Club in Michigan this weekend?
Well, Patrick, of course, but before I do address your question, I want to give a shout out to Brice. He has been among the leaders in the Utah Golf Radio JetX Jug contest. He's not currently in the top 5, but he's got a pretty good team, and they've been doing okay this year. So go, Brice, go.
Hey, I appreciate the shout out. I picked a pretty good squad this year.
There you go.
Yeah. So we're at the Detroit Golf Club, a Donald Ross course, a classic, old school, historic course, and it's one that in some ways doesn't really fit the modern game, and in some ways, as the scoring is showing, if it gets soft at all, it can't contain the modern game. And so one thing I'm looking at here is to see, it's kind of how low can they go kind of a deal going, because it's been wet in Detroit. And when that old Donald Ross Detroit Golf Club gets wet, it gets gettable to these guys, and they are getting it. So that's one thing I've had my eye on. Patrick Fishburne has been hanging around the cut line all for the first 2 days. He's been hanging around the cut line, and he just slipped out of it by a shot here as he finished his second round. And so things will have to move in order for him to make the weekend, and they might be moving the other direction.
Yeah, it looks like Patrick's going to miss the cut. Obviously, he is off the course at 6 under or 5 under, which when you miss the cut and you're shooting that well, obviously something's going on with the course. Let's dive a little bit into that more, Paul. You mentioned the course is a little wet. Things are slowing down on the greens quite a bit. But we're not even into the cut, and there are guys that are 14 under, 13 under, 12 under. Are we is this one of those courses that if it stays moist through the weekend, we could see guys inching closer to 30 under par? Or do you think we kind of return to a little bit of normal with the weekend sun ahead?
Unless they get more rain, the tournament organizers and the people who prepare the course have the ability to firm it up over the course of a couple of days. And it's very common for a golf course to get firmer and to run faster as it goes into the third and fourth day of a tournament. And so I would hope for that. I would hope that the weather cooperates. A little bit of sun, a little bit of wind, and no more rain would go a long way. I would hate to see him get to 30 under. I really would. It's fun for a little bit, but it just becomes too much of a novelty, and I don't want to see that happen on a Donald Ross course on something as venerable and as significant as the Detroit Golf Club. But they're going that direction, and the thing that happens when a golf course is wet is that the effective width of the fairways becomes significantly wider. It is much easier to hit the fairway to be in cut grass, because when the ball hits the ground, it's not running and looking for something to hide under or looking for some long grass to dive into. It'll hit and stop. And so the effective width of the fairway becomes much larger. And then from there, you can control the spin of the ball on your second shot. And if the ball is hitting and stopping, they start playing darts, and they go at pins they wouldn't normally go at, and they're able to hit it more closely than they normally would be able to. And so it's those two reasons that a wet course plays a lot easier.
Any guys that game kind of plays into their style that you see, maybe within 5 shots of the lead, guys that have a realistic chance? Hell, maybe let's go 10 over or 10 under or better as of right now, that you feel, that aggressive play, that, opportunity with the wet course may play into their hands more than others?
What a fun question, because you look at the people on the leaderboard and the people who have shot these crazy low numbers, and it's a bit of a mix. Chris Kirk's game, he's currently T1, and he's completed his second 65. He is not a bomb and gouge player. He's very controlled, hits the ball in the fairway. That's his game. Hits the ball on the green. He's a player who generally is not one who goes stupid low. He's like a 7-time winner on the PGA Tour, but he gets those wins at harder courses. Well, he is doing really well this week. And then you have players like Jake Knapp, who shot a course record 61 today. It's no big surprise to see him do it. His game is very, very different from Chris Kirk. Knapp is a big hitter, a very aggressive hitter. He can go really low. He also can throw them back and have high scores or make a birdie and follow it with a bogey. He's that kind of player. Well, he had it all going today and didn't throw anything back. He had a clean card for his 61 to set the course record. But when conditions are wet, you get a variety of different kind of players who can go low. And one thing to remember here is whether these guys are household names or not, anybody with a PGA Tour card in their pocket is visiting from Krypton. They are not like the rest of us. And any of them at any time can just go off and go low. And a wet course allows that to happen.
Well, speaking of a guy that has kind of been surprising and come onto the scene a little bit, we saw him at the Mexico Open at Vidanta World Play in the playoff with Brian Campbell. It's Aldrich Potgieter. And my question for you is, he's 20 years old, so it's impressive what he's been able to do, and he's coming from South Africa. He hits absolute bombs. A very exciting player to watch. Does he have what it takes as he grows older and grows into the game a little bit more, maybe to become one of the best players in the world, just from what we've seen him do and be able to do at 20 years old?
Yes, he does. Two things here. Yeah, he is absolutely a bomber. He is, by a surprising margin, something like 11 yards. He is the longest average driver for average driver distance on tour. He's the longest player on tour. He is an extremely talented young man. And the thing to look at for these long hitters is, do they also have control of their wedges? Do they have soft hands? Do they play smart short shots? And Potgieter does for the most part. But, when we talk about this, you look at big hitters in the past who have good hands, and they are Jack Nicklaus, Seve Ballesteros, Tiger Woods, certainly. But also John Daly, really soft hands, big hitter, really soft hands, and Scotty Scheffler, big hitter, and yet it's his wedge game that sets him apart. Who did I just mention? I just mentioned a whole bunch of major winners. When you have a big hitter with soft hands, that's when you really set apart. And Potgieter has that. I think he is on the verge of becoming one of the best players in the world. You are correct to point out that he is just 20 years old. One thing to keep in mind is that winning is a skill. The process of getting over the finish line has to be learned. Now, some people are just born with it. Jones, Nicklaus, and Woods all were born with it. They had the skill at a very early age. Everybody else has to learn it. And you watch great players, Tom Watson especially, had to learn how to win. I think Potgieter is in that situation right now. I think he's in the process of learning how to win and acquiring that skill. And when he does, I think you're going to see great things. He's a superlative talent.
Yeah, just 330 yards of drive on what is a wet course. Even that's his average at the Detroit Golf Club, which is obviously not playing super long. It's just really impressive stuff from Aldrich. Any other new faces folks might not be familiar with, Paul, that is catching your attention along those lines of Aldrich? There's I think a lot of folks are always looking for who's next. Who's that next big face in the golf world? It was Jordan Spieth for a minute. It was Justin Thomas for a minute. And we always expect these guys to have these big, long runs, and then it ends up just being a double major year. And then, we don't hear a lot of them the next couple of years. Is there maybe it is Aldrich, is there a player 19, 20, 21 years old that you see maybe ahead of their time, and maybe we can see him this weekend in Detroit?
Yeah, go to T7 on the leaderboard right now and look at Luke Clanton. He's a Seminole, came out of Florida State. He played his way onto the tour through the PJ Tour U. He was number one ranked in the world when he was an amateur. I think this kid is a real talent, and nobody will be surprised when he wins on the PJ Tour and when he starts making runs in majors. He had back-to-back top 10 finishes as an amateur when on the PGA Tour. I think Luke Clanton is a real talent.
Yeah, he's got a tied for 34 at the Travelers. He missed the cut at the RBC, but other than that, he's been pretty consistently placing at PGA events. 15th, 18th, 42nd. He's at least getting to the weekend in a lot of those events. So we'll keep an eye on the American Luke Clanton. Paul, I did want to ask, there's been a trend of, I would say, elite golfers getting a little prickly with media members like yourself. Colin Morikawa, Rory McIlroy. I know it's not necessarily new, but it does seem to be at least somewhat new, or more often, or maybe more serious between those two guys. What's going on with Rory and Colin Morikawa, and maybe other guys that you've noticed this going on with beef with the media?
Oh, mercy. I wish I understood this better. It's definitely there. It's definitely real. And it absolutely is a change for Rory McIlroy. He has been in a very different mindset prior to now, which was wonderful and refreshing because he was a combination of both candid and very, very smart. And so it was helpful, useful for everybody to hear what McIlroy had to say. And he has gotten a little short with media in the last last few weeks, the last couple months, I should say. And you know, I don't like it. And it's not just because I play media. I don't like it for what it. I don't like the look for the game and one of its biggest stars. It's a little unseemly. Now, it's not without precedence, for crying out loud. You know what I mean? We have Marshawn Lynch, Steve Carlton, Michael Jordan used to get prickly with the media. But it's not a good look, and I really hope it works itself out here sooner than later.
Yeah, and with Rory, it's been so interesting. He went after a kid who was filming him on the course and ripped his phone out of his hand. I mean, it's stuff that I never thought I'd see from Rory McIlroy. And then I started to talk to people in the golf world, and it seems to be, maybe it's just surfacing more now than it was before. Apparently there's been a lot more prickly stuff with Rory McIlroy than I was in the know about. It seems to me, at least on Rory's side, I don't know what's going on with Morikawa. Morikawa seems to be like a personal thing between him and a few reporters and what they're writing. With Rory, it seems like I'll say a very country club approach to his approach to other people around him. I'm not exactly sure I appreciate it either, Paul, but that's where we are in the golf world.
Yeah,
local golf. Paul Pugmire, what are we keeping our eye out on this weekend, or is it just Paul Pugmire and his best round on a Sunday?
Oh no, we'd be really scraping the bottom of the barrel for that. No, there's cool stuff going on. In addition to Patrick being at the Rocket Mortgage in Detroit, at least for yesterday and today, right? The U.S. Senior Open is going on. We've got a couple of players in that. Steve Schneider, member of the Utah Golf Hall of Fame, and he's played his way into this tournament a number of times. But Darren Overson, an amateur who recently turned 50, recently became a senior qualified player. Darren played his way into this, and he got a ticket punched to the Broadmoor in the U.S. Senior Open. That's pretty cool. But locally, there's a pretty big thing going on in Provo this week at Timpanogos, the Provo Open, one of the Utah majors, a 54-hole stroke play tournament that has a really great history. Some of the not only greats of the Utah game, but other greats who have come into Provo and played in this tournament and won it. And right now it's being led by Cole Ponich, the current Utah State Am champ, who just completed his career at Brigham Young University. But this is really cool. Danny Summerhays is playing in this tournament, and he's in the mix. He was in second place after the first day. And the significance there is Danny is coming off of back surgery, and he has gone through a very arduous and demanding rehabilitation to get his mobility back, and it looks like Danny is healthy because he's back playing in the Provo Open, and he seems to be playing well. He is playing well. His body seems to be standing up.
The Provo Open, of course, in local news, and then the U.S. Senior Open Championship. That's in Colorado, so somewhat local, and our guy Easton Folster of the Utah Golf Association is out there helping, of course, with the Utah Senior Open. So speaking of that, Paul, Utah Golf Association, anything you guys got going on as far as camps, kids stuff in the near future we can point folks towards?
Well, absolutely. At First Tee, we've got programming going on for kids all around the state. It's easy to find. You go to firstteeutah.org. And at First Tee, we teach the kids the game and then use the game to help teach them character values and life skills they need to become successful adults. So we've programming happening all over the state right now with First Tee. Check it out at firstteeutah.org.
firstteeutah.org, of course, the Utah Golf Association, and our friends at Uinta Golf, worldwidegolfshops.com, whether it's Callaway, Titleist, TaylorMade, or Ping. Unleash your swing at Uinta Golf and worldwidegolfshops.com. Paul Pugmire, appreciate your time as always. We're going to catch a break and, of course, continue the sports talk action. But we'll catch up next week, and we'll have a winner on the Rocket Classic and more to discuss. Appreciate your time.
Hey, thank you. Nice to talk to you.
At Paul Pugmire is where you find him. You can hear him each and every week on Utah Golf Radio, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on Utah's number one sports talk. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. We are live today at Tim Daly Ford in Spanish Fork. That's right, we're way out in Spanish Fork. I know you may be listening to us from Salt Lake City. We're out at 2534 North, 2nd East. TimDalyFord.com is where you go to see their lineup of used cars, new cars, forever warranty, employee pricing, a bunch going on at Tim Daly this weekend. And Steve, sales guy, stops by to chat with us. What's up, boss?
Heck yeah, man. What's going on?
We're out here, of course, checking some trucks out. Brice liked the Maverick Lobo. The blue is catching his eye. Tell us a little bit about this truck.
This truck's really cool. So it just came out 2025. It's a Lobo. So all they did is they just took this Maverick that has just absolutely exploded on the market.
I drove a Ford Ranger, 1995, until the wheels fell off.
Yeah, man.
This is like the very updated new version of, if you're like me driving a Ford Ranger around.
Exactly.
10,
yeah, and we
ago.
have the new Ford Ranger as well, but it's just not the same. The Maverick really puts you in that same kind of realm. It's a little bit smaller, gets you around, it gets good fuel mileage. That's a huge thing for people. And this Lobo, all they did is they just took that vehicle and they just made it like a race car, man. It's all-wheel drive, 2.0 turbo. It's so much fun to drive. They dropped it a little bit, nice big wheels, man. It's just a pimp machine. It's awesome.
It's obviously a good-looking truck. It's fun to drive. Now, you guys have forever warranties on, is that every car that you sell here?
Yeah, almost everything. So this is what it covers, Kes. So obviously everything new across the board. Doesn't matter what it is, except for diesel motors.
Gotcha.
So unfortunately it doesn't cover the diesel, which is a new thing. But everything else across the board it does. Used vehicles as well. And that's what puts us aside from everybody else. Volkswagen, a couple other people, right, they've got it. But with used vehicles, that's what it does. 6 years or newer, 60,000 miles, can't be a luxury or foreign vehicle, specifically German. Cool. Everything else across the board, man, you're set up.
The forever warranty, that's something, like we said, you can't really get in a lot of places. It's really, really good value. Now, one other thing you guys are hitting hard this summer, employee pricing.
Oh, yeah.
That's running out. That's something you got to, the clock is ticking on the employee pricing. Let us know about that. You work here. You probably get great deals on these cars if you want to drive out with them.
Yeah.
We can get the same.
Yeah. So this is a perfect example. I just sold my new uncle-in-law a vehicle. He actually got it for cheaper than I did, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, man, how does that happen?" So most people when they come in, they're looking for something that's like around invoice, right? They want to get a good deal. We're thousands under invoice. I mean, we get a great deal. It's awesome working here. But to be able to have the public have something like that, I mean, it's unheard of. It's never happened.
Is there one car on this lot right now? Maybe it's one guy wants a Bronco or the new F-150. Is there one you can give a special deal on right now that maybe someone's listening and say, hey, now's the time to go get it?
Absolutely. I have one that I have never seen anything like this before. I'm talking it's like 20 grand. I've got a 24 brand new F-150. Okay. It is the crew cab. Everything's awesome about it. It's perfect for someone out there that's looking for something that's like a construction truck, anything like that. There's only one kicker because we're in Utah. It's two-wheel drive. But I would tell you right now, if you guys come down here, come talk to Steven, I will give you guys the deal of your life. It is amazing.
There you go. An F-150. It's a two-wheel drive, so maybe you're pulling stuff instead of four-wheeling out in the mountains, right?
Exactly.
Maybe there's something else you're doing with that truck. Come down, get the deal at Tim Daly. Of course, we're at Tim Daly Ford in Spanish Fork, but there's 7 locations. You can check locations online and see all of their lineups as well. Any of the cars that you have here on the lot, they're all online. You can go in and check that out at timdalyford.com. Before we get you out of here, where can folks go? Phone number, website. What's the best way if maybe they don't want to come in and get the sales pitch, get the used car dealer thing that everyone talks about. What's the best way before they come in to maybe get a good idea?
Absolutely. This is the perfect way to do it. Yep. So you go onto our website. There's a little icon bottom right of the website. You can click that right there. text in whatever information you want. It gets sent to every single one of these guys.
There we go.
One of us will grab it. You'll be able to talk to us personally. It'll be super quick, super fast. We'll have all the information right on hand. You'll be set up and good to go.
Maybe you're looking for a specific model, a specific car. You want to make sure it's here before you come down and test drive it. The best way to do it is timdalyford.com. Use that feature there. Steve, appreciate your time, dude.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me, guys.
2534 North, 2nd East in Spanish Fork. It's right off the freeway. You guys won't miss it. And Steve and the folks down here will have you guys taken care of. Forever warranties, employee pricing, as you mentioned, big deal on that F-150 if you get down here today. Tim Daly, Utah's #1 used car dealer, timdalyford.com. Back on the other side, Matt Brown of Extra Points joins the show. College football, college basketball. We're talking college sports off the field, off the court. Give you guys the latest in the NIL space and the NCAA on Utah's #1 sports talk. It's Larson and Larson, Porter and Brice taking you through it on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. 4 p.m. hour of The Drive on Utah's #1 sports talk. It's ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, ESPN700sports.com, or wherever you happen to podcast. You can search for us and rate, review, subscribe, do all the things. It does help out the program, and we appreciate you for doing so. I am Porter Larson. This is Brice Larson alongside me. Both of us pretty familiar with our next guest, a guy who covers college football, covers college sports, and does a lot of the off-the-court stuff, maybe in the court, rather, the courtroom. Matt Brown joins the program of Extra Points. Matt Brown, EP, on socials. Matt, how's it going, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on today, guys.
Yeah, you're on with Brice and Porter Larson. We join you live from Utah County.
Oh, one of my favorite places. So glad that you get to enjoy.
I got to start with what has been a pretty busy week here locally on the realignment side now, not in the Big 12, not with BYU or Utah, but as you covered earlier this week, we do have some realignment news here in the Beehive State. Catch folks up on what happened with the Big Sky and the ASUN and a few of the smaller conferences and how that kind of came about and where we sit now with Southern Utah, Utah Tech, and the Big Sky.
It's great news if you are a fan of college sports in the southern part of the Beehive State. As the WAC has slowly begun to disintegrate, the last people at the party really were Southern Utah and Utah Tech, and there was some real concern about where they were going to end up moving the rest of their sports after UVU left for the Big West, a league that does not sponsor football. Wouldn't have been a great fit for the other two Utah institutions. I know that they had conversations with the Summit League, had some basic conversations with the ASUN over on the complete other side of the country, and a couple of weeks ago, it didn't look like the Big Sky was going to be an option. There was still some real bad blood and hurt feelings over Southern Utah's departure from the league a couple of years ago to join the WAC, and some concern in college sports industry circles that Utah Tech isn't really ready to compete at this level given some of the infrastructure work that they have to do. But now that Sacramento State left, created an opening, the lobbying efforts were successful, and now both of those institutions have a stable home in what is, for my money, one of the best FCS leagues in the country for football, and a strong one in many other sports. So good news for anybody locally that cares about those programs. Good news for anybody that is interested in taking a road trip to see Montana every once in a while. And good news for some stability, I think, in realignment here in the West.
Well, I think that's the biggest question there is, if you're a fan of some of these schools, you mentioned there's questions on if they're ready for the Division I jump. There's questions on, where they'll be playing as far as the conference goes in the year after. That's kind of a tough place to be if you're trying to grow a program, if you're trying to level up in college sports. Do you feel like for the teams that are now in this version of the Big Sky, there's a little bit of a take a deep breath and you're safe here for a little bit?
I mean, safe is not a word I think you can really use to describe almost anybody
I know.
in college sports. Ohio State is safe. Alabama is safe. Most
right.
Everybody else needs to have a plan B. But there is a difference between, plan B is maybe the Summit League, or plan B is we'll see what Weber is doing and we'll go with them, or, oh my God, are we going to have to be an independent for 2 years while we try to cobble something together? And now the Utah institutions don't have to worry about that. They know what their new peer schools are. They know what the standard is. I'm sure there's going to be some aggressive fundraising. Southern Utah is going to need a permanent athletic director. There's a lot of work to be done. But knowing, okay, this is my conference schedule. This is where my games are going to be on TV. This is where, what we're going to be pitching on the recruiting trail. Of course, that matters a great deal. Everybody, whether you're Weber State, whether you're Utah Valley, whether you're Utah or BYU, has to think about what can I control right now in the next couple of years, and what are the things outside of my control, and what's my plan B? Because I don't know if there's a conference anywhere, short of maybe the Big Ten and SEC, maybe not even them, I'd be willing to write their current membership in stone tablets for the next decade.
Kind of along the same lines there, but more on the revenue sharing side of things with these mid-major schools. Like, I've had a lot of conversations with Dr. Jared Sumption at Utah Valley about where they're at. He told me at NACTA that whole conference of athletic directors was totally really for the Power Four conferences. All of the information that was given out was for Power Four conferences. Nobody really knows what's going on at the mid-major level. In terms of the $20.5 million in the revenue sharing, what does it look like for these mid-major schools that have football teams, and then, of course, Utah Valley that doesn't have a football team? How much money is there truly to spend when these small schools don't have these huge budgets?
Yeah, they absolutely don't. And there's really a pretty big variance, right? Because mid-major could mean a school like VCU in the A-10 that's going to be able to spend upwards of $7 million for that revenue sharing, where they don't have football, where they have 25,000 plus students. And it might mean some schools at the bottom end who I know can't share $20 million because, brother, I have your FRS report and you don't make $20 million. That would be your entire budget. What is not uncommon for schools in the Big West, for schools in the Big Sky, for schools that have athletic department budgets somewhere in like the $25 to $35 million range, is you're opting in and you're not going to share that much hold hard cash. There's going to be some money going to men's and women's basketball. Some of the Big West institutions are going to distribute some money to baseball, as I understand it. But is Utah Valley going to be able to pay enough money to their starting shooting guard if that shooting guard gets an offer at Arkansas? No. But that also wasn't the case now. That hasn't really been the case ever. You're having enough here to potentially bring in one or two transfers and try to keep some of your guys. I think the gap between what's happening at the largest 30 athletic departments and everybody else is going to widen. But revenue sharing does create some interesting competitive opportunities across the other 200 institutions, and it'll be interesting to see what the local schools do with their small amounts of money to try and find creative ways to stretch that as much as they can.
Matt, obviously the revenue share it makes official a lot of the things that we've seen unofficially happening in college football for quite some time. It, I think, helps on the campus side, right? It helps administrators with a little bit more clarity on the players in their locker room, the folks they're dealing with. But it also still leaves a whole bunch of questions on beyond that $20.5 million, right? The NIL space, the agency space, the recruiting space. What does it look like in the next 5 years on further attempts at regulation on that, on agents in college sports working with 16, 17-year-old kids, with the money that comes in from boosters on top of the $20.5 million? What does the next 5 years look like as far as trying to regulate or at least trying to normalize what is kind of the Wild West in college sports right now?
Yeah, the terrible sport. It's a terrible sports radio answer, but in my professional opinion, it's the truth. Any number of things could happen in the next 5 years that has nothing to do with the NCAA. The entity that's really in charge of what happens next is the court system. We have a world now with the post-House settlement where every single college athlete NIL deal, whether your school opted into the settlement or not, from Utah Valley to BYU, if you do a deal with more than $600, you're supposed to report that to this clearinghouse that's going to run it up against its range of compensation that's approved and say whether the deal passes muster or not. Eventually somebody is likely to sue when their deal is said that it's not compliant and has to be revised or dropped. And someone's going to sue and claim that this clearinghouse was not collectively bargained. It is a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, and take it to court. And maybe it wins, maybe it doesn't. Congress could decide to say that college athletes cannot be employees and that the NCAA has the antitrust protection to enforce some of these rules. That's something that is being pushed pretty heavily by Senator Ted Cruz and by many other Republican lawmakers in the House and the Senate. But we've also heard this story before over the last couple of years. And shoot, I mean, we almost had a war last week. Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? There's plenty of things that could be distractions. for lawmakers in their quest to bring some kind of order to all of this. So we could have a system where the House settlement functions essentially as a CBA without the players actually being able to bargain, and this becomes the rules, and you're going to have a return of the bagman economy rather than the kind of over-the-table, collective funded payments to athletes. We could have something completely different. And what's frustrating and to a lot of the ADs that people like you and I talk to, or coaches, is that Charlie Baker doesn't really get to make this decision. It's not something that the Big 12 conference offices can figure out or a bunch of smart university presidents can figure out. It's going to depend on what happens with a couple of federal judges and what happens in the U.S. Senate.
Which it just makes this all much more clear, doesn't it, Matt?
I know that when I get put on the radio, what sports fans across the country want to talk about on a Friday afternoon is Mike Lee and Ted Cruz. You just hear it all the time, and I'm happy to fill that void.
I can promise you, Matt, you do not want to get me started on Mike Lee right now because that will go in a really bad direction. Don't do it. Don't do it.
I know we're on an FCC-regulated channel. I'll be on my best. You're
gonna get me fired if you get me talking about Mike Lee on this radio. Okay.
Look, okay, I'm done. I would like to get credentialed at Utah again at some point in the future, so I will be quiet.
Moving away from the Senate, for my purposes, I do want to ask Matt, when this settlement came down. When you saw that there was a revenue share and when you saw it was $20.5 million, what was your reaction to that number? Because I do think that there's clearly thought behind it, but as we mentioned, there are some schools that is nothing, right? That is pocket change. And then there are a lot of schools in this state. I'm talking Utah State. I'm talking mid-major programs where that's the budget. So when you saw that $20.5 million mark, what was your first initial reaction, and how does it affect maybe a mid-major team opposed to an Ohio State, an Alabama, a Florida?
So what I will say is I think $20.5 million is the perfect number to make everybody mad. Here's the
right.
truth.
That's kind of why I phrased it that way.
Sure. Even at Ohio State and Texas and Alabama, $20 million is a lot of money. It is a lot of money that is going to require some significant changes to fit into their budget. Like Oklahoma, gigantic athletic department, top 10 in the country. They're laying off a lot of people. Ohio State is going to lay people off. Texas is going to lay people off, or they're going to have positions that are going to go unfilled, and salaries for assistant coaches and for head coaches and stuff that's not football. And for a lot of other spending, that's going to go down. There weren't as many people in NACDA as there are at other years because, professional development spending is one of the first places that athletic departments are going to cut. Now, granted, you're right. It is different when you're making cuts from a department of $220 million versus cuts from a department of $21 million. The number comes from the average earned revenue from the power conference institutions and Notre Dame, the money that they earn from television and selling tickets and from licensing and selling parking spaces, all of that stuff. They added it together, they divide it by 65 or 66, and they take 22% of that number, and that gives you 20.5. And the 22% comes from this calculation here where typically a revenue split in the pros is around 50%. But then if for college you want to remove all the spending on stuff like scholarships and academic support and stuff that gets spent on athletes but isn't cash, and then you end up with 20.5. Is that the calculation I would have used? Probably not, especially because I work with these reports for a living, and I know that there's a lot of questions about them. But is this a ridiculous calculation based on how the settlement was set up? I don't think so. I do know that $20.5 million is not enough to cover what the current labor market is if you want to be competitive in multiple sports. I'm pretty skeptical of reports that I see every once in a while that Texas is going to have a $50 million roster or so-and-so has $45 million roster for football. A lot of the reports about spending last year were overinflated as well. But you really don't have enough money to go completely all in on men's basketball, baseball, and football and be competitive at what rates currently are, unless you have money coming in above the cap. And we're gonna have some interesting conversations right now about what is going to be compliant and what people's risk tolerance is for getting money over the cap right now.
All right, Matt, about a year to a year and a half ago this time, you became the go-to source for the College Football 25 video game. I've heard that the story behind how you came across the information in the FOIA is actually a pretty good one. I kind of caught a little bit of it in a recent interview that you did, but kind of explain to us how you came across the College Football 25 information in a FOIA that you did, and then what that spun into becoming the go-to source for all things video games.
I think it is kind of ironic given, my life trajectory and my personal history and also this market. But I first got this information in around 2022 when I was writing a story about beer. And I didn't drink then. I knew very little about beer. But I knew that there were some universities that were trying to make extra money by licensing their IP to local breweries. You might have like the official Nevada Wolfpack Pale Ale or the official Bowling Green whiskey or something, right? So I filed a bunch of open records requests for correspondence between a few universities and CLC, the major licensing organization about licensing projects that were not closed. Most of the stuff you see about with licensing are with T-shirt companies or other apparel. So yeah, I got some of the information about beer, but then I also got the original project proposal from EA Sports that laid out when the game was supposed to come out and how people were going to be paid and what systems it was going to come out for. So once you get that, you're like, oh, this is way more interesting than beer. It didn't occur to me that you could get video game information this way. And over the last 2.5 years, I filed hundreds of these things. But then also would then build relationships with people at Learfield, at CLC, at Electronic Arts, at some of the agencies that work as go-betweens for these sorts of things to break a bunch of news. Well, what I can tell you is I have not been nearly as involved in the reporting on this year's college football game, which comes out in about 2 weeks. Part of that is because the folks at EA got smart and they stopped putting stuff into emails. So I did the same thing and just got a bunch of emails that said, like, call me on the phone so we can talk about the video game proposal because they didn't want me to keep leaking stuff. And also because there's not going to be nearly as many interesting changes from year to year. But this is a good way to learn about how the video game sausage is made on the college side, and I imagine there's going to be some pretty interesting business stories once this game comes out in just a couple of weeks.
Okay, so I'm glad that you brought up that portion about EA getting smart and just having phone conversations and different things like that. I think if we kind of shift it over to another conversation of college football that involves Bill Belichick and everything that's going on at UNC right now, he too is trying to get around the FOIA situation of emails and whatnot. Is that legal? Can they say don't use university emails to communicate university business and use your personal ones so that can't get FOIA'd and the public can't know that information? Or where's the line that's crossed there in this type of situation with Bill Belichick?
Yeah. Here's the thing. Of course that's illegal. If you are conducting university business or, for that matter, state government business, public entity business from personal email addresses, almost every state in the country, with a few exceptions, says, yeah, those should be considered public records. What a lot of athletic departments do, and the specifics of this vary on the state, right, because the open records law is done by the state, but they will, switch to phone conversations. They will use some technology, essentially Zoom, and then make sure that nobody takes a recording of anything. And it is against the spirit of the law, and sometimes against the text of the law. But like a lot of things with the law, it's not like the FBI is sitting there waiting for a coach to conduct business over the phone and then slap him with a fine. These kind of statutes get enforced when somebody sues, and sometimes locally the Utah Press Association or various newspapers will sue for some of these documents, and I'm sure that will be the case for some folks in North Carolina. But most of the time, if you're somebody like me, you realize I don't have a connection with somebody who's passed the bar in all 50 states. And even if I'm right, am I willing to spend $60,000 and like all of those hours to maybe get some emails about Bill Belichick's girlfriend? For me, unfortunately, the answer becomes usually not. Like we probably will file some lawsuits this year now that we make enough money, or we can kind of pick our spots and do that. But when you hear about me filing a lawsuit over an open records request, it's going to be about something that's a bigger deal than a meme or a video game. I wish that I had the money to compel everyone to follow the law for kicks and giggles. I need a few more of you guys listening to the show to subscribe to Extra Points before I can do that.
I was going to say, maybe FOIA requests for like $1 million business opportunities and big money deals. Bill Belichick's 24-year-old Instagram girlfriend. Maybe you don't need to sue for that. But who knows? Who knows what you'll find?
Yeah, we'll let the Raleigh Observer or some local newspaper do that. If NFL.com wants to do that, I will cheer them on. I think we're saving our powder for a couple of some bigger contracts, some potential lawsuits, that sort of thing.
Fair enough, Matt. We appreciate your time as always. For those that want the legal stories in sports, or maybe some more info on the business side of sports, let folks know where the best place they can go to find that is.
You can find my coverage at extrapointsmb.com. There are 2 newsletters a week that are completely free. 2 are behind a paywall. I can tell you it's read by just about all of the athletic departments and conferences in this market. If you want to read what they're reading in a way that's probably not going to bore you, I think you'd enjoy Extra Points.
There it is, Matt Brown at Matt Brown EP, and Extra Points is where you find him. Appreciate your time, Matt. Have a good one.
Always. Take care, fellas. Appreciate you.
Yeah, the big business deal side of sports, that's where you go for Matt Brown. Speaking of big business guys, we got Steve from Tim Daly Ford here with us on the line. Salesman extraordinaire. What's up, my friend?
What's going on?
Obviously, you told us in that last segment, the forever warranty, employee pricing. You got a good deal on this new F-150 out here. I'll give you a different test, okay? I'm a Chevy guy.
Okay.
Talk me into coming to Tim Daly Ford. What makes it different? What makes it so that maybe someone who isn't just the run-of-the-mill farmer Tim who comes and buys a new F-150 at the same dealership every 10 years, talk a Chevy guy into coming down to Tim Daly Ford and getting in one of these trucks?
For sure, yeah. So really, this is the biggest thing that I have, is that Ford is the #1 selling truck, not in America, but the entire world.
Right.
And it's for good reason, right? They're going to be the most comfortable truck. They're going to be the most functional. They're going to be the one that is they go above and beyond on so many different things, from build quality to having that name behind them. And when you drive one and you sit in a Chevy, it's a good truck. Every truck nowadays is good, right? But when you sit in a Ford, it's a great truck, and for good reason.
Well, and you know what you get? Employee pricing.
Exactly. And that's the biggest thing right now, right? Which a couple of people, they have kind of tried to get into it a little bit, but the big manufacturers are struggling to match that, right? And with Ford, they just came out and they just said, hey, listen, this is our motto: from America, for America. And I absolutely love that, right? So it's a huge advantage right now for consumers to come in and get a good deal.
And obviously when you save money trying to import cars, you save money on the sell as well, and that's what helps you guys be able to offer that pricing. The forever warranty, something not a lot of dealerships offer. Let folks know the details there and the extent of it.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
It's pretty remarkable.
It is. It really is. So obviously everything new, pre-owned, 6 years or newer, under 60,000 miles. Excludes German vehicles, couple of foreigns. Can't do that on a Rolls Royce.
Right.
With that being said, it's going to cover the engine, transmission, the four-wheel drive components, the turbos, the drive axles, everything in that vehicle that's lubricated by oil. It's covered forever. As long as you do the regular maintenance, man, you're covered.
Tim Daly Ford, of course. Steve will hook you guys up with the best deals, the forever warranty, employee pricing, and it is Utah's #1 used car franchise dealer with over 1,300 options there, including hundreds of EVs. And the time to buy is now. Why is that? The time to buy
is now. Employee pricing, it's ending soon. It's towards the end of the month right now. Right now is the best time for a customer across the board to come in. We've got good deals. We're motivated. We just got a new sales manager. We're ready to. We're innovative. We're ready to go, and we're ready to help you guys out.
And a lot like real estate, car prices usually just go up, right?
Exactly.
So come in now, get the earliest price. It's almost always the best price. Tim Daly Ford. TimDalyFord.com. We're at 2534 North, 2nd East and Spanish Fork. You guys are here this weekend?
Absolutely.
I think we always like to get that out there because there's folks that may be listening now, but they're driving home from work or they're at work still. They may not be able to make it in while we're here live, but hey, this weekend while they're free, come by, test drive a truck. Come test drive this little Lobo. It looks like a lot of fun. Steve will maybe get you out the door with it. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Back on the other side, final segment of the 4 o'clock hour. Brice and I will recap the NBA draft, the Jazz selections. We might talk a little rodeo in the next segment as well on Utah's #1 sports talk. Porter Larson, Brice Larson taking you through it. It's ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, and, of course, ESPN700sports.com. Welcome back in. Drive time on ESPN 700 as we approach the 5 o'clock hour. Brice Larson, Porter Larson, taking you through it here on this Friday afternoon. Spence will be back on a Monday. Amy Donaldson will stop by. Howard Beck will stop by. We'll have a Rocket Classic to react to. RSL will be in action over the weekend. We'll have a little bit more news, I'm sure, on the NBA draft and otherwise. Wanted to get a little update on that situation. The Utah Jazz, of course, drafting Ace Bailey, Walter Clayton Jr. In the first round with those two guys. And Ace Bailey, that's where all the conversation has been centered. A top 5 pick who, at least upon early discussions, was not too high on maybe coming to Utah. Brice, what we've really uncovered is that was a lot to do about nothing. And it seems his agent, now that we've been talking about 16, 17, 18-year-old kids being repped by unofficial agents, well, we're back to it. Full circle here. Ace Bailey's going to report to camp. He's going to be here tomorrow. And it seems like that was a big nothing burger.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of that had to do with the TV coverage of round number 2 of the NBA draft.
He's calling out ESPN on ESPN radio.
More specifically, Jay Billis.
Yeah.
I will call out Jay Billis on what he had to say because he brought up the talking point of Ace Bailey didn't do a press conference immediately after he was drafted, which and actually he did do it with the NBA, but not necessarily with the Utah Jazz.
He did hop on a Zoom call with all of us in the media at Zion's headquarters. Like you were saying, there was a lot of context that they just didn't really include or didn't know.
And the one thing you have to know about the Utah Jazz organization, the same thing happened last year, is that they get all the entire rookie draft class together to do the press conference and official welcome into the organization the following week. It happened last year with that draft class. It's happening this year. It'll be on Monday or Tuesday. They will introduce them all together, and it was a whole lot of about nothing because they just needed something to talk about a little bit on that pre-draft show.
Right. It's ultimately it's a TV show. That's what they're trying to do is create a story, create a narrative, create something you can go with. I don't think Jay Billis is going to intentionally go that far, veer that far out of bounds, but I also think he didn't know some of the situation, and that's where the disappointment falls on the coverage of it, where, hey, you have people at ESPN work with us regularly.
Yeah.
Their best reporters are on Spence's show every day of the week, Monday through Friday, 5 times a week. You could text one of us. You could text one of the beat writers who was in the building talking to Ace Bailey 20 minutes after he was drafted by the Utah Jazz and said nothing but good things about the organization, about the conversations he had beforehand. He didn't know a lick about Utah, but he seemed excited about coming here and seemed more than open to the possibility of it. It wasn't until, of course, we got the word from his representation, from his agency, that maybe things weren't what they wanted on that end. And I think that Ace's representation learned a very quick lesson that when you're dealing with what is a fake NIL world, truly, what we just talked about with Matt Brown, until this year, it has been a completely up-in-the-air, Wild West NIL space. That changes when you get into the NBA. When you're working with professionals, you're working with National Basketball Association GMs and owners, you're not going to have the leverage you had with a director of player operations at a small college. That, I think, is where we ran into a problem with one. What's the name? Omar
Cooper.
Omar Cooper,
yeah.
The representation for one Ace Bailey. Walter Clayton Jr., the other draft pick from the Jazz, they moved up to get him at 18, and they moved up to get him because, by all accounts, the Miami Heat were ready to take him if he was still available. Your thoughts on Walter Clayton, a guy that we saw a lot of in the NCAA tournament out of Florida, and I think, Brice, if you look at the pick of Walter Clayton, you look at the pick of Ace Bailey, you have to just think the Jazz are, let's get shooting, let's get scoring, let's trade John Collins and Jordan Clarkson, and let's move on from this. It seems like those two picks pretty much told you the story and what the Jazz want to do this offseason.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Walter Clayton Jr., the one thing that kind of worries you about him, 6'2", playing the point guard position, I think there are some questions about him being able to play on the defensive end in the NBA and what he can do as far as that goes. But as far as scoring, you mentioned it. If they were going for dudes that can score the basketball, they picked up two of the most prolific scorers in that NBA draft, and that should excite a lot of Jazz fans. The biggest question with Walter Clayton Jr., as we already mentioned, is the defensive side. Just the size and the ability, maybe a couple of passing questions, and I think Summer League is going to hash out a lot of what he can and can't do at a really high clip and ability, and we'll see where he kind of fits in and slots into this Utah Jazz lineup.
You add on top of it John Tonji and R.J. Lewis, more scoring.
Yeah.
So for the Jazz, it was pretty clear what they were doing in their draft strategy. And you mentioned Walter Clayton at 6'2" as a guard. It's reminding me a little bit about the roster the Jazz were building early with Mike Conley, with Donovan Mitchell. If you have good guards that you like the way they operate the pick and roll, you like how they get to the rim, that's fine. But you also have to keep in mind that if your point guard is 6'1" and your shooting guard is 6'2", and that's your backcourt, you're going to run into 30 teams in the NBA that have guys that are 6 inches taller and are going to try to blow by you every time down the floor. They're going to try to isolate you in the block. They're going to try to back you down into the post. That's something the Jazz are going to have to keep in mind as they build this roster. Not a lot of length or size in the guard positions.
And if you look at teams that were in the postseason this year on the defensive side, the Oklahoma City Thunder, one of the top 3 defense. Yeah. If you look at Indiana, though, 17th. They're right there in the middle. The difference, I thought, was just playmaking ability of Indiana that really carried them through the playoffs, not necessarily being great on the defensive side of the ball. It was just clutch time.
It was Tyrese Halliburton. It was that game against the Knicks with Naismith, right? I mean, what they did in crunch time, and as you mentioned, playmaking ability, you can't teach that.
Yeah.
You can teach, defensive schemes. You can teach and improve upon someone's shooting stroke. You can't teach the kind of shot making that we saw from Walter Clayton in the tournament, the kind of shot making we saw from Tyrese Halliburton in the postseason. So I think that's one of the things the Jazz were looking at, and I think one of the things they got in the draft: Ace Bailey at number 5, Walter Clayton trading up at 18, John Tonji in the second round at 53, and then R.J. Lewis, a guy who our draft coverage, if you listen to it live with Gordy Chiesa, he mentioned R.J. as a player to look at 53. The Jazz didn't even have to spend a pick on him. They got him undrafted. A big plus there. Stephen Crowell, the other addition out of Wisconsin. Stay tuned for coverage of the NHL draft. We're going to have a bunch of that on Monday. Of course, that gets going today and tomorrow. And the Utah Mammoth, they have the 4th pick. A top 5 pick, you got to think, and listen, I'm not going to lie, NHL prospects, not exactly my lane. I don't have a good feel of like the next era of hockey players. But it feels to me, Brice, that a top 5 pick, it's got to be a spot where you can make an impact pretty quickly in the NHL.
One thing that I'm really curious to see with this NHL team, with what Bill Armstrong decides to do at number 4, is whether they keep the pick or decide to trade him. The trade for J.J. Peterka that just happened, I've talked to Bill Armstrong about it, and he said they needed a guy that could score goals. Well, you went out and found a guy that could score goals from Buffalo. Now what do they do with that number 4 overall pick? A guy at center makes a lot of sense. One guy that has gone in a lot of mock drafts to Utah is Brady Martin out of the OHL. He's a dude that, and you look at the center position, it is a key position in the National Hockey League. That's a dude to keep your eye on if they keep the number 4 pick. If they decide to ship it off, expect them to go and find a guy that can play at that same center position immediately and both be an offensive piece but more of a two-way player and give him a little bit of bolster in that one or two top lines there.
Well, and speaking of those top 2 lines, you mentioned J.J. Peterka, a guy who they just traded for. He's going to probably be in their second line, but the lead in that second line. He would be the second leading scorer on the Utah Mammoth in 2025 if you were to put him on the roster from what he did in Buffalo this year. So they're adding talent, and with the draft this weekend, within the hour, probably adding some more. We'll have a recap of that next week on the show with some good hockey guests joining us as we go. In the 5 o'clock hour, you're going to hear more NBA draft chatter, more college football chatter, Andy Larson, Chris Kamrani, and more. But before we go to a break, before we get to it with our guys from Tim Daly, I got a special guest with us. His name's Wade. He's a rodeo man. Wade, how are you?
Good. How are you today?
Doing well. Wade
Good.
Garrett.
Correct.
You were the VP of the Ute Stampede Rodeo, correct?
Correct.
All right. Tell us about the Ute Stampede. Nephi, July 9th to 12th. We talked a little bit about it a few days ago on the show, but it's a fun event, and it's got the Extreme Bulls to kick it off. Is that the first night?
It is the first night, and we just found out the contestants coming, and you talk about top draft picks. We are getting the top bull riders in the country. Will be showing up in Nephi for the Extreme Bulls event on the 9th.
And the Extreme Bulls, correct me if I'm wrong, that's also kind of an all-star cast of bulls, right?
Correct.
It's different rough stock contractors that are bringing ranked bulls
Yes.
into the venue. So
Yep.
what's that? How's that differentiate from just a regular rodeo in the summer?
So a lot of people's favorite part of the rodeo is bull riding. So we're bringing all the top bulls, all the top bull riders, so you can see that in one night. Most of us are adrenaline junkies of some sort. We don't want to see anybody hurt, but if they're going to be, we want to be there when it happens.
I was going to say, a lot of people go to the rodeo and they just wait until the end for the fireworks and the bulls, right? For me, I love the timed events. My favorite are the timed events, but a good portion, I would say, of people who maybe haven't been to the rodeos before or don't do it normally, they're there for the bull riding. They're there for the fireworks. They're there for the good times, right? This is a night at the Extreme Bulls where you get, 2+ hours of some of the top bull riders, some of the top bulls in the world, nonstop excitement.
Yeah, and it's all night long, all-star bull riders, all-star bulls, plus great entertainment in between. We have a carnival going, so if your kids need to go for a ride or get some cotton candy or a corn dog, we got it going right there on Wednesday night, and we're just looking way forward to having folks come down.
And that's on Wednesday, but you still have the full PRCA 4-day rodeo to follow that,
Yeah,
right?
but then we kick off the next night on Thursday. That's our family night. Have a great rodeo. The following 3 nights, again, carnival, all the fun stuff. Great family event, affordable for families. We just love to see you come to Nephi.
You got a discount on tickets up until July 1st.
Correct.
So that's the best time to get it, obviously, before this weekend hits. July 1st coming up early next week. I think Tuesday is when that discount will expire. So go to UtestampedeRodeo.com, head over to the ticket site, and you can get a discount up until July 1st for those events. July 9th through 12th in Nephi, of course, opening up with the Extreme Bulls on Wednesday. I assume that a lot of folks in this area have been to the rodeo before. We're in Spanish Fork. We're out in Nephi. If someone hasn't been, maybe they're listening to this show out in Salt Lake, talk them into coming out to the rodeo. What are they going to see that they maybe haven't before?
So tickets are super affordable. These athletes actually have to pay an entry fee,
Right.
and then they also get paid if they win. So way more incentives than some of these big contracts you guys have been talking about all day. And they're going to be the best in the world. And it's an hour and 15 minutes from Salt Lake to Nephi, down I-15. Very affordable event for families. Ticket prices start as low as $5.50 for kids.
Can't really beat that.
And you can't beat that. And our top price is $17. So come check it out. It's great excitement. It's a great night out. And Nephi is a beautiful place to come visit. You don't have to stay, but you can come visit.
I was going to say, you're going to kick us out anyway, but we'll come hang out in Nephi for the night. I like that you mentioned the athletes. We've been talking about these basketball players, these college players who are making millions and millions of dollars. Good for them. They deserve it. They work their tails off.
Absolutely.
These are athletes that, number one, a lot of times they are running a ranch at home as well. They are fighting to survive. And now let's be clear, some of these guys, Casey Field, some of the world title guys, they make plenty of money. but it's not necessarily the NBA world. It's a different kind of class of people, and it's a lot of fun. A lot people that are more like you and I maybe than you are like LeBron James.
Correct.
Anything else you want to get out there for folks who want to get out to the Ute Stampede? Website is utestampederodeo.com. Is there somewhere they can call maybe if they have questions, or is that probably the best place?
No, absolutely. We do have a ticket office there in Nephi that is opened at 435-623-5608. If you have questions, problems, we do only limit so many tickets because of scammers. So if you want like a big family one, you can call and they can help you out really quickly down there. And with questions, go to the website. To your point, Utah's own Stetson Wright 2 years ago was the first Cowboy to almost make $1 million in 1 year. He was just this short. I'm hoping he pulls it off this year. He will be there in Nephi. But a lot of the top athletes in the world have come from Utah. Last year, Utah Cowboys won all the rough stock events.
Swept the rough stock events.
Crazy. We swept the rough stock, and they're Utah athletes. People think Texas is the place for rodeo, but Utah's the place. So if you haven't seen one, or it's been a while, or you go to lots of them, come on down to Nephi and have a great time and see these guys that are homegrown athletes and great talent.
Yeah, as he mentioned, a lot of homegrown talent, a lot of homegrown athletes here in Utah at that rodeo, and guys that compete for NFR titles on a yearly basis from right here in Utah. I grew up with the Fields, so up in Oakley, right? Casey Fields, one of the greatest of all time, the best of all time. When you talk about riding the bareback, I mean, just a phenomenal story there. And his dad, probably the greatest all-around cowboy of all time too.
Yes, world champion, 2 generations, and now their nephew, so Louis' grandson Daxton, will be competing as well. So 3 generations,
bunch of Wrights.
Yep, bunch of Wrights, Field, Waits, Hayes Waite.
Right.
We have several of those great Utah talents. Cooper James, if he's held up, was number 2 in the world. He won $108,000 in one night at
sounds fun.
So anyway,
a lot of local Cowboys, and it'll be a fun time. UteStampedeRodeo.com, and tell them Wade Garrett sent you there. Appreciate your time, man.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll be out there. I'll be out there for the Ute Stampede.
We look forward to having you down there.
July 9th and 12th in Nephi, Utah. UteStampedeRodeo.com. Andy Larson, Chris Comrani in the 5 o'clock hour will wrap things up and set you loose before 6 p.m. here at Tim Daly Ford in Spanish Fork, 2534 North, 2nd East at timdalyford.com. Brice and I back with more in the 5 o'clock hour next. It is Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, and at ESPN700sports.com. Oh, welcome back in. Drive time on ESPN 700. Setting you loose for the weekend with a little Chris Ledoux. That was a request from one of our listeners yesterday. Sorry I waited so long to fulfill your wish, but there's some Chris for you. One of our favorites. This old Cowboys hat. Brice Larson. Maybe of Cowboy stock or Spanish Fork kid.
Yeah, Spanish Fork royalty down here.
I see you maybe knew our friend Wade of the Ute Stampede, or at least some family connections there.
Yeah, a little family connection. My dad went to Juab High School back in the day, so a little, yeah.
Couple of country boys doing your sports radio Friday for
That's
you.
That's
right. Hey, yeah, go out to the Stampede, July 9th in Nephi. But the week before, come see me in Oakley, 4th of July. No better place to spend it. They don't have many tickets left, but I think if you go to oakleycity.com, they may have a few in there. I'll be up there and hope to see you along for the ride. All right, we did a bunch of Utah Jazz talks. If you missed any of that, Andy Larson is up and available on our podcast catcher. Chris Kamrani joined us, did more college football talk, but he also talked a little bit about the Jazz and was pretty insightful in doing so. That is available on our podcast catcher. We talked some local golf with Paul Pugmire, and then a really interesting conversation with our friend Matt Brown on the latest in the legal world of college sports, the business side of college sports. A lot of fun with Matt. So check our podcast feed for any of the stuff you missed for the show today. It's up and available there. Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and, of course, at ESPN700sports.com is where you go. Brice, thank you for joining me today, my man.
Love to be on with you. Anytime you need me, just give me a ring and I'll pop on over here, my friend.
Larson and Larson edition of The Drive today. Hope it's not the last this summer. Brice and I will be back together again before you know it. And I don't know what we'll be talking about. On Monday, we'll be talking some NHL draft, RSL versus Sporting Kansas City. I'm sure some more NBA draft as well with Spence. Amy Donaldson stops by. Tom Haberstroh stops by. I think Craig Bolerjack is going to stop by. So tune in for a loaded Monday show. Spence back in the air chair for Brice Larson. For Spencer here at Tim Daly Ford, I am Porter Larson here on Utah's #1 sports talk. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM.